Chapter 126. Ron did a good thing. He single-handedly made the 4 major colleges hate one person at the same time. I have to say that this is an incredible achievement. Before him, the most exaggerated time was when the 3 major colleges excluded Slytherin. It's good for him. He can go to an academy by himself. Soon, the class bell rang. Professor Binns floated into the classroom and began to lecture. Because he didn't need to eat, he didn't know what happened in the auditorium. However, today the Slytherin snakes answered the questions enthusiastically, which surprised Professor Binns. Since the last exchange with Erwin, he has rediscovered his enthusiasm for classes. I also started asking questions in class and began to exercise my right to add points. In one class, a group of little snakes gained a lot of points. Of course, Erwin also gained a lot and was very satisfied. Where can I find such a good thing? Others work for him, and he gets paid. At the same time, in Professor McGonagall's office, because she had to deal with Ron's matter, she didn't even go to teach the 6th grade students who were supposed to take the Transfiguration. Fortunately, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff took Transfiguration class together in the 6th grade. Therefore, Professor McGonagall arranged for self-study and nothing would go wrong. Ron crouched in the corner. His eyes were dull and his face was full of fear. Professor McGonagall has informed his parents. He seems to have been able to predict his own tragic future. Professor McGonagall had a cold face. She was a very good professor. He is also a professor who really treats his students well. If she were another person, she would never let the students squat in the corner, like an abandoned stray dog. However, Ron scolded Erwin. It was Erwin. Therefore, Professor McGonagall really didn't bother to care about him. Just then, there was a rush of footsteps in the corridor. Subsequently, there was a knock on the door of Professor McGonagall's office. "Come in." Arthur and Molly pushed open the door and walked into the office. Saw Ron squatting in the corner. Molly asked, "Professor McGonagall, did Ron get into any trouble? He called us over in such a hurry." Professor McGonagall said, "Sit down first." Mr. and Mrs. Weasley looked at each other. He sat down opposite Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall said, "Ron Weasley publicly called a child a mudblood today." Molly and Arthur's eyes suddenly widened. "How is that possible?" Molly turned to look at Ron. "Ron, how dare you? I really can't imagine that such vicious words would come out of your mouth." Arthur said, "Professor McGonagall, where is that poor child? I want to apologize to him on Ron's behalf." Professor McGonagall said, "He is in class now. What I need to tell you is that when he cursed, he was in the auditorium, in front of all the little wizards and all the professors." The expressions of Mr. and Mrs. Weasley changed instantly. They know what this means. It meant that Ron almost cursed half of Hogwarts. This also includes some professors. Professor McGonagall continued, "Professor Snape was there at that time. Professor Snape almost killed him. You should know very well what the word mudblood means to Snape." Molly stood up directly and came to Ron. A mouth twitched over. "How dare you do such a thing? How dare you?" Mrs. Molly's chest heaved violently. His face was flushed red, and he was obviously very angry. Arthur and Professor McGonagall sat where they were without any intention of stopping them. Ron lowered his head and did not dare to refute. Professor McGonagall continued, "Also, the child he scolded is called Erwin. Erwin Cavendi." Arthur's eyes widened. "Is that Erwin from Slytherin?" Professor McGonagall nodded. "Yes, Erwin, who is likely to become the real prefect of Slytherin this weekend. By the way, there is one more thing. Ron Weasley, you go out first." Ron walked out of the office honestly. There are still fresh slap marks on his face. He didn't dare to refute it now. After the office door closes, Professor McGonagall said, "Erwin's father used the pseudonym Amelia Frosius when he was a student at Hogwarts." Professor McGonagall only learned about this not long ago. Dumbledore told her. It was also at that time that Professor McGonagall knew Erwin's true life experience. I also know why Snape and Dumbledore value the Cavendi family so much. Arthur stood up suddenly from his chair. "Amelia? You said that child is Amelia's child." Professor McGonagall nodded. "Yes, it's Amelia's child. So do you understand why I called you and your wife here? You know what this child's parents mean." Arthur leaned back weakly in his chair. "He is actually Amelia's child. What have I done? My child actually said such vicious words to Amelia's child." Mrs. Molly put one hand on the wall. Tears welled up from my eyes without knowing when. "We're sorry, Amelia." "Professor McGonagall, can we see the child?" Professor McGonagall hesitated. "It's better not to. Dumbledore doesn't want that child to know many things so early. You also know the enemies that the child faces. Dumbledore will not tell him the truth before he is ready. I called you here just to ask you how to solve this matter. Arthur said, listen to Professor McGonagall. Even if you say you want Ron to drop out of school, I will not hesitate to break his wand. Professor McGonagall sighed. Actually, I haven't figured out how to solve it. Erwin is very powerful in Slytherin now. If Professor Snape hadn't taken action today, I have no doubt that those students would use their hands to the wand taught Ron a lesson, Molly said. Then let's ask Erwin what he thinks, Professor McGonagall. We won't reveal what happened at the beginning. We just want to meet him. Professor McGonagall said, okay, let's wait until lunch. You guys wait in my office first. Erwin never misses any class for any reason. Arthur said, yes. His father is like this, studious, excellent, and helpful. Although I was in Gryffindor at the time and was a few grades above him, he still helped me a lot. Amelia is, of course. The son of such a person will be good too, Molly said. I'll go out and take a look. Arthur nodded to Professor McGonagall. Get out of the office. Ron stood next to the office. He lowered his head and didn't know what he was thinking. Molly said, if you were not my son, just because of what you said to Erwin, I would not hesitate to smash your head. I am really disappointed in you. Chapter 127. Ron looked up. He said unconvinced, why, I am your son. Is there something wrong in what I said? Isn't he a mudblood? Why do all of you blame me? Where did I go wrong? Mrs. Molly heard this. Just slap him in the face. His eyes were full of disappointment. Why are you like this? How dare you say that he is a mudblood? No one has a purer blood than his. Even the current 28 pure blood tribes cannot compare to him in terms of blood. Ron, you feel strange to me now. Are you still my child? Ron's eyes filled with tears. Gritting his teeth, he stubbornly refused to let the tears flow down. I'm not wrong. Why do all of you think I am wrong? He is an evil Slytherin. He is a dark wizard. I am not wrong. Mrs. Molly was numb. She couldn't figure out why Ron had so much ill will toward Erwin. He raised his hand and put it down again, shaking his head. Ron, I will take you home. You are no longer suitable to go to Hogwarts. I don't want to teach you anymore. After speaking, Mrs. Molly turned back to Professor McGonagall's office. Ron suddenly became anxious. No, Mom. I was wrong. Don't let me drop out of school. I can't drop out. Ron was really anxious this time. He could only imagine what it would be like to leave Hogwarts. The wand will be broken. From then on, he was no longer in the magical world. Mrs. Molly shook her head. Ignore Ron. Disappointment reaches the extreme and my heart dies. She was really disappointed with Ron now. In the office, the three of them were very silent. Time passed bit by bit. At this time, Erwin was enjoying his spells class. Today, our dear Professor Flitwick teaches the Levitation charm, and he was in class with Gryffindor. Out of foresight, Erwin was far away from Seamus, Harry, Potter, and Neville. Not for anything else, just for safety. After all, these three people all have a bit of evil in them. Who knows if Erwin will be given a direct surprise? Not surprisingly, our blaster once again showed his talent in the classroom. Looking at Harry's darkened half of his face, Erwin couldn't help but shudder. Fortunately, he is smart. Even Professor Flitwick was startled. The eyes that looked at Simo were filled with brilliance. Even with his knowledge, he couldn't figure out why this feather exploded. He couldn't figure it out, really couldn't figure it out at all. The Slytherin snakes were taught by Erwin. Everyone successfully casts the levitating spell. Even Malfoy's two lackeys who don't look very smart are the same. This made Professor Flitwick ecstatic. I don't even know who to give extra points to. In the end, the little snakes of Slytherin House jointly won 20 points for Slytherin. Erwin casually recorded the scores on paper, used for future points record. Then he leaned his head in boredom. He used the wand in his hand to control the feathers in front of him and danced a shortened version of the waltz on the table. Play and think about things at the same time. Wait until Erwin reacts. Flitwick didn't know when he came to Erwin. All the little wizards also looked at the feathers on Erwin's table in surprise. Flitwick said, amazing level of spells. Erwin, I sometimes really wonder how you practice spells. Erwin quickly removed the magic output from the wand. Sorry, Professor. I was a little distracted. Professor Flitwick shook his head. It doesn't matter, kid. I see everything that happens in the auditorium. It has nothing to do with you. That Weasley child is too offensive. His parents are very easygoing and excellent people. His brothers are great too. Erwin said, I know, Professor. I don't blame him. My bloodline was given by my parents. I have never felt dissatisfied or unable to accept it. Professor Flitwick said, Erwin, you are very generous. A generous person can do many great things. If you feel sad, you can come to my office in the evening. I have some black tea brought from the south. It tastes great. You can tell me about your worries. I'm willing to listen. Erwin nodded. Thank you, Professor. Professor Flitwick said, because of your level of spell casting, 10 points to Slytherin. Erwin bowed slightly. Thank you for your generosity, Professor. Professor Flitwick said, you deserve it, kid. All the little snakes looked at Erwin with distress. Erwin was so sad, so sad. He had never lost his mind in class before, but he actually lost his mind. The hatred for Ron in my heart increased even more. Even the little Gryffindor lions had a bit of sympathy for Erwin and a bit of disgust for Ron in their hearts. As everyone knows, Erwin was just thinking about how to use this matter to maximize his own benefits. He didn't know that his father was so involved with the Weasley family. Otherwise, he can think of more ways. I have to say that Dumbledore's inability to speak clearly really caused Erwin a lot of trouble. Soon, the bell rang for the end of get out of class. Erwin packed up his books and was about to leave. At this time, Harry Potter came over. Prefect Erwin. Wait a minute. Malfoy stood in front of Erwin. Harry Potter, what are you doing? Stay away from our superiors. Weasley's friends are Slytherin's mortal enemies. Harry Potter lowered his head. Didn't talk back. Erwin said, Malfoy, get out of the way. Malfoy turned to look at Erwin. But, Prefect, he is a friend of the red-haired Weasley. Erwin said, don't anger irrelevant people for anything. This is what I taught you. Have you forgotten? Malfoy sighed and stepped out of the way. Erwin waved. Come here and say, Harry, what's wrong? Harry Potter walked towards Erwin. When passing by Malfoy, Malfoy lowered his voice and said, listen up, Harry Potter. If you dare to offend my prefect again, believe me, I will fight you to the death. Harry Potter said nothing. Came to Erwin. Sorry, prefect. I apologize to you on Ron's behalf. Erwin waved his hand. This matter has nothing to do with you, Harry. Harry Potter said, no, it's all because of me. Ron said bad things about you. I couldn't hold it back. I had a few arguments with him, and then we started fighting. That's why he scolded you. So this is me, it's my fault. I'm sorry, Prefect, it's all my fault. I let you down. Harry Potter was in a very depressed mood. Chapter 128. Erwin stood up and patted Harry Potter on the shoulder. No, Harry, it has nothing to do with you. I also want to thank you. You just said you defended me, didn't you? So, don't think too much. I have taught Malfoy and the others not to anger anyone who has nothing to do with anything. Naturally, I will not anger you, Harry. It is your choice to choose friends. We are all your friends and will not interfere with anything else you have. Friends. A true friend only wants to make you better. Do you understand? Harry Potter looked at Erwin. Really? Erwin spread his hands. Of course. However, if you want to say that you disappoint me, there is one thing. That is, you should not fight with your friends. Fists are not a way for a gentleman to solve problems. There is a quarrel. If so, you should resolve the conflict, instead of starting a fight. Harry, you have to understand this. Okay, let's go and eat. After speaking, Erwin stood up and walked out of the classroom. Harry Potter looked at Erwin's back, thinking about Ron and thinking about Erwin. The gap has never been clearer. Harry Potter shouted, Prefect, Ron, is not my friend? Erwin raised the corners of his mouth and kept walking towards the outside of the classroom. Harry Potter shouted these words and felt much more relaxed. He no longer has to be caught in the middle for so many ridiculous reasons. Malfoy came to Harry Potter's side. You can defend Prefect Erwin. I recognize you. Hello. My name is Draco Malfoy. Malfoy said, extending his hand. His face was slightly red. Harry Potter glanced at Malfoy's outstretched hand. He looked at Malfoy again. A smile appeared on his face. He reached out and shook Malfoy's hand. Hello, Draco. My name is Harry Potter. Both of them had smiles on their faces. The sun shone on the hands held together by the two of them. That's not quite right. I wanted to write about friendship, but why do I suddenly feel so gay? It's a bit annoying because my writing style isn't enough. Erwin saw movement in the classroom out of the corner of his eye. My heart blossomed with joy. Unintentionally inserting willows and willows create shade. This is really such a coincidence. I have to admit, Ron is really a lucky star. No wonder the original trio. There is culture and background, but also paired with Ron who is nothing. Now it seems that this is a mascot. The things that originally troubled Erwin still need to be laid out slowly and carefully. As a result, it was solved with an early effort. The seeds of Slytherin's savior have already begun to take root and sprout. Sure enough, the ancients are right. No matter how much you plan, nothing can compare to God's blessings. I don't know when Dumbledore will come back. It will be a surprise when Dumbledore comes back. Thinking about it, Erwin got excited. But it still lacks a fire. The last fire. This fire is also the most important scene in the play. Thinking about it, it should be about a start. It just depends on when the supporting characters appear. Arriving at the auditorium, Erwin glanced around. Professor McGonagall is not at the Gryffindor table. Ron isn't here either. As for the other members of the Weasley family, including Gemini, there was some worry on his face. After eating, Erwin was about to go back to the dormitory, met Professor McGonagall in the corridor. In other words, Professor McGonagall has been waiting for him. Erwin saluted. Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall nodded. Are you full? Come to my office. Erwin nodded, a glint flashing in his eyes. It seems that the supporting role has appeared. At this moment, a black shadow came to Erwin. It was Professor Snape. Snape said, I'll go too. Snape's tone was firm, and he had no intention of discussing it with Professor McGonagall. Walk directly to the front. Erwin glanced at Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall sighed. Forget it. Let's go together. You are the prefect of Slytherin. Professor Snape should be there. Erwin nodded and said nothing more. It was obvious that Professor Snape was here to give him a leg up. Although Erwin had already guessed that it was probably Mr. and Mrs. Weasley who were coming. If you were facing someone like old Malfoy, you need Snape Battlefield. The couple really didn't need Snape. Because except for Ron, there are almost no bad people in the Weasley family. However, Erwin still appreciated Snape's kindness. Next, the drama is about to begin. What Erwin didn't know was that after he left the auditorium, owls flew away from the Slytherin table, fly to various places in the magical world. In Diagon Alley, there were also 2 owls flying into the sky. Tom watched the owl fly away, close the store door, leave Diagon Alley. The door to Professor McGonagall's office. Erwin was far away when he saw Ron standing at the door. After Ron saw Erwin, a flash of resentment flashed in his eyes. A pair of eyes that wanted to eat Erwin alive. Erwin raised the corners of his mouth, walking behind Professor McGonagall and Snape. After the two entered the office, Erwin came to Ron and said in a low voice, You say, should I let you break your wand and drop out of school, or should I let you stay at Hogwarts and bear everyone's disgusted eyes? Isn't it too lenient for you to let you have this wand? You should stay. Stay to withstand everyone's eyes. Let me guess what will happen to you later. Everyone will despise you. No one even wants to share a dormitory with you, and no one wants to sit at the same table with you during class go-ahead. Everyone hates you. They all despise you. Even the professors will look down on you. TSK, TSK, TSK. Think about it. This seems to be the best outcome. Ron's eyes widened suddenly. From Erwin's words, he seemed to have seen his own ending. He forgot about it. In other words, he didn't even think about it. That's why he didn't want to drop out of school, but now after listening to Erwin's words, Ron suddenly realized that staying at Hogwarts seemed to be the really stupid idea. Ron said, You won't get what you want. I will drop out of school and I will leave Hogwarts. Erwin spread his hands. I won't let you go. Ron, I said it. Everything has just begun. I will let you stay. I have arranged many dramas for you, and you are the protagonist in these dramas. I can't live without you. Ron roared. No, you evil Slytherin. You dark wizard. You damn mudblood. Erwin raised the corners of his mouth. Sure enough, you can't help it. The expression on Erwin's face changed instantly. Sadness overflowed from his eyes. In the office, Snape and others rushed out. Murderous aura surged around Snape. Chapter 129. Erwin said, Ron, I really want to be a friend with you. I don't care if you look down on my bloodline, but I have never wanted to be an enemy of anyone. This was the first sentence that Professor Snape, Professor McGonagall, and Mr. and Mrs. Weasley heard when they walked out of the office. Professor Snape had the wand in his hand. Professor McGonagall quickly stood in front of Ron. Snape, calm down and leave it to me. Erwin tugged on Snape's sleeve. Snape said coldly, This is the second time. This is the second time. Arthur Weasley, the good son you taught. How dare he speak to Erwin like this? If you don't give me a tell me, believe me, even Dumbledore can't protect him. I said, You may have forgotten what I have done. Snape didn't like anyone mentioning his past, and he didn't want to recall his time as a Death Eater. But if Snape takes the initiative to talk about these things, it means that he really wants to kill someone. Erwin knows this, and Professor McGonagall knows it. The Weasleys still knew. Arthur's eyes were red, like an angry lion. Came to Ron. A mouth twitched over. Ron was whipped and fell to the ground. Ron, why are you like this? How dare you say such vicious words again? Blood spilled from the corner of Ron's mouth, covering his face. Why do you all blame me? It was him. He was the one who provoked me first. Why don't you blame him? Molly said, I didn't see Erwin provoking you. I only heard Erwin saying that he wanted to be friends with you. As a victim, he took the initiative to show his kindness to you. However, you still responded to him with your bad and even vicious attitude. Ron Weasley, I am ashamed of you. The Weasley family has become a shame because of your existence. Ron was at a loss for words now. He couldn't explain it either. Erwin felt that the heat was still a little low. It seems like a little more fire needs to be added. Hiding behind Professor Snape, a smile appeared on Erwin's lips. He glanced at Ron provocatively. Sure enough, Ron received Erwin's look. Just take out the wand. I'm going to kill you. In front of this group of backbone members of the Order of the Phoenix, how could Ron have a chance to take action? The moment the wand appeared, Snape had already taken action. A disarming spell and a stun spell. Ron flew out directly and hit the wall. He passed out directly. Snape struck without mercy. Ron fell to the ground. There was a crisp click sound. Erwin was satisfied. If this hatred is in place, Ron will definitely be the best person to support the tank in the future. The most important thing is that Ron went too far. The Weasley family will feel even more guilty. If Ron had the ability, Erwin didn't even mind letting Ron give him a break. Only in this way can the play be considered complete. However, the ideal is full. No matter how perfect the plan is, you're still at the mercy of the person implementing the plan. Ron doesn't have that strength. Even if Erwin is standing here, Ron couldn't even cast a spell. This is Ron's level. All I can say is that there are some flaws. And this flaw needs Erwin to use his acting skills to make up for it. Erwin's eyes were filled with disappointment. I don't know why. Ron hates me so much. In fact, I quite like him, even though I have had trouble with him. But I really want to make friends with him. Percy Weasley and George and Fred. I like them very much. I always thought that I would become friends with Ron too. Snape said coldly. He doesn't deserve it. Professor McGonagall sighed. The look in Erwin's eyes was filled with distress. Arthur Weasley and Molly's cheeks were red. I don't know if I'm embarrassed or angry. Professor McGonagall said. Send him to the infirmary first. Molly hugged Ron. Erwin, I'm sorry. I apologize to you on Ron's behalf. Erwin quickly said. You don't have to be like this. It's not your fault. It's not anyone's fault either. I can only say that there is a misunderstanding between Ron and I. I believe that our misunderstanding can be explained clearly. Molly looked at Erwin, and then at Ron in her arms. This moment, the difference is so obvious. Molly carried Ron to the infirmary. Arthur stays here. After all, the matter has not been resolved. Professor McGonagall said, Let's go. Let's talk about it in the office. Go into the office. Professor McGonagall did not speak first. In fact, she really doesn't know how to deal with it now. Ron is really stupid. Professor McGonagall was also angry. After all, before knowing Erwin's life experience, Erwin was Professor McGonagall's favorite student. There is even a vague feeling of being a direct disciple. After knowing Erwin's identity, Professor McGonagall was even more interested in Erwin. And now Erwin was actually being scolded. Professor McGonagall is able to sit here and give a good face because of being a member of the Order of the Phoenix. To be honest, the entire Order of the Phoenix owes a favor to the Cavendi family. Let's put it this way, if Erwin's parents hadn't been hunted down as well, Lily Potter might not even die. Snape said coldly, I am not here to sit with you. Arthur Weasley, you have to give me an explanation. Arthur said, Ron did something wrong. I will give Erwin an explanation. What does it have to do with you? Snape sneered, Erwin is my godson. Tell me, what does this have to do with me? Erwin was shocked. Why didn't he know when it happened? He is a godfather. Why is there an extra godfather? This is what you taught Grandpa? But out of rationality, Erwin did not refute. It would actually be nice to have Snape as godfather. At least when you inherit the inheritance in the future, it will be a huge fortune. The expressions of Arthur and Professor McGonagall changed at the same time. Arthur said, You said Erwin is your godson? How is that possible? I have never heard Amelia say that. Snape said, Do I need to tell you about our affairs? Erwin scratched his head. Amelia, my father? Does Weasley know his father? Erwin calculated his age. A sudden realization. That's right, that's right. If my father was also a student at Hogwarts, then it should be the same level as Snape, and Arthur should be 2 levels higher than his father. Or level 3. Erwin didn't know either, so he could only make a rough estimate. Erwin seemed to have been ignoring a question. That is, my father was also a student at Hogwarts, so my father has connections. At least the current Arthur Weasley is one of them. Chapter 130. And listening to this, it seems that the connection is not shallow. If this is the case, it seems that there are many things for me that don't need to be so troublesome. Therefore, he has missed a lot of his father's growth journey. No, that doesn't seem right. It's the opposite of Tiangyang. Shaking his head, Erwin shook the messy thoughts out of his mind. Let's solve the immediate matter first. Arthur said, Erwin, I apologize to you on Ron's behalf. He did something wrong. Erwin said, Sir, you're welcome. It's actually not that serious. We are all children. How can there be children who don't have quarrels with each other? Arthur shook his head. No, it's because he doesn't know what to do. It's really hard for me to imagine how much harm that word will cause you. Erwin said, Actually, it doesn't matter. I won't take it to heart. Erwin said and lowered his head. The corner of his eye was full of loss and sadness. See this scene. The guilt in Arthur's heart became even stronger. Arthur said, I'm sorry, Erwin. Although I know that apologizing is not enough to cover up the pain in your heart, but it is also the only thing I can do. Don't worry. I will leave Hogwarts with Ron. He will never have the opportunity to offend you again. Snape and Professor McGonagall didn't speak. The two of them almost acquiesced to this choice. If Erwin had been someone else today, Ron might still have a chance to survive. But Erwin was here, so he had to drop out. Erwin said anxiously after hearing this, No, sir, Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape, don't let Ron drop out of school. This is really not a big deal. He won't drop out of school. If he drops out, he will be ruined. I can't do this. Snape looked at Erwin confused. He knew Erwin, even better than Erwin imagined. So he knew very well that Erwin was definitely not the kind of person who would retaliate with kindness. In other words, there is no one in Slytherin who repays kindness with kindness. But Snape didn't ask any more questions. No matter what Erwin does, he won't ask too many questions. Arthur looked at Erwin. His eyes were full of emotion. Look, this is a good boy. Repaying evil with kindness is astonishing. Professor McGonagall also looked at Erwin with admiration. After all, Erwin's attitude is very much in line with the wishes of the older cat lady. Erwin said, Sir, if my guess is correct, you should be Ron's father. Then you can be called my uncle. Uncle, in fact, Ron and I just have some small conflicts. If I want Ron to take me away, then I will ruin Ron's future. For me, this is a hurdle that I can't get over. Every time I think about it in the future, I will feel guilty. I won't blame Ron. If so, I will try my best to explain the misunderstanding between us to Ron. Of course, if the explanation is not clear, it doesn't matter. I just don't want to ruin Ron's future because of me. He is still young, and everyone can make mistakes. Ron will make mistakes, and so will I. If I put myself in my shoes, if one day I make a mistake, I hope someone can help me when I am confused and give me a chance to correct when I make a mistake. The corners of Erwin's eyes were slightly moist. It seemed very emotional. Arthur and Professor McGonagall looked at each other. Arthur said, But this is not fair to you. Erwin smiled and said, Uncle, there is no fairness in this. We are all classmates, and I am willing to give him a chance to correct himself. I am also willing to give each other a chance to explain the misunderstanding. Arthur was a little embarrassed. Professor McGonagall said, Since Erwin himself won't pursue it, forget it. However, Ron needs to apologize to Erwin in front of everyone in the auditorium. Arthur nodded. This is what he should do. Arthur then looked at Erwin. Erwin, your tolerance and open-mindedness are just like your father. Erwin's eyes drooped slightly. Thank you for your compliment. I miss my father very much, even though he is no longer here. But I am still willing to be an excellent person and not let our Cavendi family fall into the trap. Arthur's eyes were filled with distress. I'm sorry, Erwin. I mentioned something I shouldn't have mentioned. Erwin waved his hand. If nothing happens, I'll leave first. I'm going to take a rest. There are classes in the afternoon. Arthur nodded. Yes, because these things affect your rest time. I'm sorry. Erwin. Erwin greeted Professor McGonagall. Turn around and leave. Snape also left with Erwin. After the two left, Arthur said, "What a generous child. The more he behaves like this, the more guilty I feel. This is so unfair to him. Amelia gave birth to a good child. I'm sorry for Amelia and this child." Professor McGonagall said, "Okay, Arthur, Erwin doesn't care anymore. Then forget about it. As for your guilt, I think you will have a chance to make up for it. Whether it's for Amelia or this child." Arthur said, "Of course I will. Even if Ron is not involved, even if it is because of Amelia, I will spare no effort to help him, as long as I can do it." Professor McGonagall nodded. "Go and see Ron. By the time of the dinner, I hope Ron can apologize to Erwin. This is my bottom line. If he can't apologize." Arthur, "I think even I can't even find a reason to forgive you." Arthur nodded. "I will." After saying that, Arthur turned and left Professor McGonagall's office. Professor McGonagall leaned back in her chair, thinking about what Erwin just said. "My heart was full of heartache for Erwin being sensible. I have been without my parents since I was a child, and I have experienced crisis after crisis." After learning about Erwin's life experience, Professor McGonagall went to find out what Erwin had done over the years. In fact, she didn't find anything. Erwin's methods are ruthless, but there are only two kinds of people who know this. The first type is Erwin's people. They don't talk nonsense. The other is Erwin's enemy. They wanted to speak, but they couldn't. Therefore, Professor McGonagall only knew that Erwin helped the building collapse and brought the Cavendi family to where it is today. I also know that Erwin has experienced many crises. In addition to distressed heart, there is no other feeling. And now, Erwin has experienced such injustice again at Hogwarts. If Erwin hadn't asked for mercy today, it would have been Dumbledore. Professor McGonagall would insist on firing Ron. This is what Professor McGonagall told Erwin. Above the corridor, Snape said, "Erwin, what do you think?" Erwin stopped. "It's nothing. It's just that it's not a big deal in itself. Don't you think so, Godfather?" Chapter 131. Snape was stunned for a moment. Then he said, "I just said he was your godfather, but it was for other reasons. It cannot be taken seriously." Erwin smiled and said, "Then the professor doesn't want to be my godfather?" Snape said nothing. Erwin said, "If the professor doesn't mind, I really want to recognize the professor as my godfather. After all, you know it. I don't have any other relatives." Snape heard Erwin's words. There was a touch of sourness in my heart. "As my godson, I must remind you that no matter what your plans are, the Weasley family is Dumbledore's die-hard loyalists. You know what I mean." After saying that, Snape left quickly. While turning his back to Erwin, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Erwin smiled too. Of course he understood what Snape was saying. Snape recognized the name of this godfather. In addition, Snape also saw that Erwin was not innocent in handling Ron's affairs. In fact, anyone who knows Erwin should be able to tell that Erwin's purpose is not simple. However, what can Dumbledore's die-hard fans do? Erwin didn't say that he was going to conquer the Weasley family now. Erwin knew very well that the Weasley family was not that easy to conquer at all. All Erwin needs to do is plant a seed in the hearts of Arthur and Molly. The name of this seed is guilt. Man is actually a very strange creature. Feelings often influence a person's life. This is true in life and work, especially for people with a conscience. Not surprisingly, the Weasleys are very conscientious people. They also have a collective name, called good people. The reason why good people don't live long is because they are swayed by a lot of emotions, such as guilt, gratitude, etc. Erwin didn't need the Weasleys to be that kind of loyal thugs. Erwin couldn't do that either. With Dumbledore in front of him, no one can do this. But Erwin can make them take action for Erwin at certain times out of guilt. That's enough. That's all Erwin wanted. As for the time for them to take action, of course it is not now. Erwin is still of great use to the Weasley family. The relationship between his father and the Weasley family was an unexpected surprise for Erwin. Although Erwin didn't know what was going on. But with Erwin's mind, there are some guesses from some fragments of words. I have the identity of an only son of an old friend, especially since this old friend is already dead. Presumably, his words and actions will make Mr. and Mrs. Weasley feel even more guilty. Advertisement for Erwin. This is a good thing. He would make the chips in Erwin's hand heavier. As for Ron, an elephant never takes an ant seriously. Although there is an old saying that the number of ants kills the elephant, but there are too many of you. Now Ron belonged to that ant, the one and only ant. Ron's only role for Erwin is to make Erwin's layout more complete. Erwin could make better use of it after making the Weasleys' guilt worse. That's all. Other than that, Ron is really useless. Walking in the corridor, Erwin planned to go back to the dormitory to sleep. After all, there should be a big show to be performed tonight. I just don't know if Ron will follow his script, but I guess Erwin is about the same. After all, Erwin never talks without giving up. For a person like him, every word he says is very purposeful. Across the corridor, just around the corner, Erwin saw Hagrid. Standing in the corridor, Hagrid was almost as tall as the stone pillar next to him. I have to say that hybrid giants are also giants. Erwin said, Hagrid, what are you doing here? Hagrid didn't know what he was thinking. After hearing Erwin's voice, Hagrid turned his head quickly. Erwin, are you okay? I heard what happened today, and I'm a little worried about you, so I came here to see you. Erwin smiled and said, It's okay, Hagrid. I'm fine, Hagrid said. I know Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, and I have basically met all the other children in their family. They are all very polite people. Although they are one of the 28 pure-blood tribes, you don't have the slightest hint of a dandy, but you are polite, completely different from other pure-blood families. I didn't expect that their youngest son would actually say that about you. Erwin said, It's okay, Hagrid. This is not a big deal, is it? I also met Mr. Arthur. He is a very good person, and I will not take this matter to heart. Hagrid nodded. That's good. I just came to see you. I'm a little worried about you. Although you should have no shortage of people to care about you, I still want to come and see you. Erwin smiled and said, Thank you, Hagrid. Really, I am very grateful to you for coming to see me. We are friends, and of course I need your care. If you don't come today, I plan to go to you. Let me tell you about the troubles in my heart. Hagrid said, You can come at any time. You know, Erwin, I am very grateful to you. If it weren't for you, there would be no place to sell my materials. You have given me so much help. During this time, even Yaya, I can eat one meal of meat every day. Oh yes, Yaya is my dog. Erwin said, I know. I've seen it many times, and to be honest, it's a little timid. A smile appeared on Hagrid's face. Yes, he is indeed a very timid dog. Erwin said, Hagrid, you came to me for something else, right? Hagrid hesitated and said, As expected, I can't hide it from you. There are indeed other things. If possible, without wasting your time. Can you go see Harry? He's here today. And it was he who told me what happened in the auditorium, that he was very disappointed because he lost his friend. Of course, I think Ron is not worthy of being his friend, but he is still a little disappointed. I can see it. I can see from it can be heard from his tone that he admires you very much. I think you should go and see him. Erwin nodded. Of course, Hagrid. I will go even without you, you know. Harry is also my friend. Hagrid said, Thank you so much. I knew you would agree to it. After all, I have never seen a better little wizard than you. Erwin said, Thank you for the compliment, Hagrid. By the way, how about your dragon egg? Hagrid's eyes lit up instantly when he mentioned this. He glanced around. I think it is about to hatch. Follow the method you taught me. In the past few days, the temperature on the surface of the eggshell has been getting higher and higher, and there is the sound of claws rubbing inside. Chapter 132. Erwin nodded. It is indeed about to hatch. Congratulations, Hagrid. You will soon harvest a little dragon that belongs to you. When you go back, you can look under the eggshell. There will be a light color under the eggshell. Lines, according to the progress you mentioned, the dragon egg should hatch soon. So there should be a line left under the eggshell, and when the lines disappear, it will hatch. I estimate it will not take more than a week. Hagrid said. Is that so? Oh my God. Erwin, you are so knowledgeable. I will take a look when I get back. I will tell you then. I think you should also want to witness the process of hatching the little dragon. Erwin smiled. Of course. I'm looking forward to it. Hagrid left happily. Creatures like giants have two simple brains and are fools. As for the mixed blood giant, although it is smarter than the pure blood giant, it is not much smarter. It can be seen from Hagrid's performance in the original work. It has absolutely nothing to do with intelligence. After Hagrid left, Erwin also had no intention of finding Harry Potter. Let's leave it to our Malfoy to comfort little Potter. Erwin believed that Malfoy would handle it properly, to help our Harry get over his broken love. After all, the best way to forget the old love is to find a new love. If you still can't forget it, you can choose to find another one. Malfoy has always been in love, but now that the two are lovers, Malfoy will definitely take good care of his new friend. Erwin snapped his fingers. Go directly back to your dormitory. Lying on the bed comfortably, I checked the time and took a nap. The afternoon course was very dull. There is almost nothing worth saying. Maybe it's because I didn't have the afternoon class with Gryffindor. Erwin really missed a lot of fun. And just when Erwin was bored and taking afternoon classes, as everyone knows, a group of father-calling masters have already begun to exert their efforts. A letter was placed on the table of the pureblood family patriarch. This matter has only really begun to ferment until now. In fact, Erwin didn't expect this at all. In other words, he underestimated his position in the hearts of these father-savvy people. Also underestimates what Slytherin means to these pureblood families. Among them, old Malfoy was the most powerful. Lucius Malfoy looked at the letter in his hand. He was out of breath, and his chest was heaving violently. Both hands were shaking. How dare he, despicable Weasley? How dare he say such things about Amelia's children? How dare he, if it hadn't been for Amelia, that be asterisk 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 D. Arthur would have been dead long ago. How dare he let his son insulted Erwin? Damn it, damn thing. Narcissa Malfoy walked into the study. What's wrong? Is Draco the cause of being so angry? Lucius slapped the letter in his hand on the table. See for yourself. Damn Weasley. Red-haired pauper. I really can't think of more vicious words to describe them. Narcissa picked up the letter on the table with a confused look on her face. I was very curious. After all, Lucius had always been influenced by certain things to always put etiquette first. So there is rarely such a gaffe. Narcissa looked carefully at the letter in her hand. Advertisement. His face gradually turned cold. A flick of the wrist. The wand appears in hand. He walked out angrily. Lucius was startled. What do you want to do? Narcissa said. I'm going to kill that little b asterisk 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 D. I'm going to let him know what the death curse is. I'm going to let him suffer the most horrific torture in the world. Lucius quickly hugged Narcissa. Narcissa, don't be impulsive. Calm down. Narcissa is harder to control than a New Year pig. Struggled in Lucius' arms. Let me go, Lucius. I want to kill him. He must die. How dare he? How dare he insult Amelia's children? I must kill him today. Lucius regretted it a little. He forgot one thing. Narcissa's relationship with Erwin's mother was so good that they were the same person. Let's just say that when Lucius wanted to date Narcissa, Lucius had to ask Erwin's mother for permission. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the chance at all. He shouldn't have let Narcissa know about this. Lucius said, calm down first. What's the use of killing him now? Do you want to enter Azkaban? Narcissa said, what if I go to Azkaban? I want him to die. I want that be asterisk 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 D to die. Lucius felt a headache. What the hell? It's sloppy. It's difficult. It's too difficult. Lucius said, if you kill the Weasleys because of this, have you thought about what Erwin will do next? Will he be involved? After Lucius finished speaking, Narcissa calmed down. Feeling Narcissa stop struggling in her arms, Lucius let go of his hand and shook his aching arm. Narcissa said, then let him go so easily? A cold light flashed in Lucius's eyes. Of course not. Children have their own battlefield, and we have our own battlefield. The Weasley family, I have long wanted to deal with them. Now I have found a reason. Moreover, Narcissa, don't underestimate Erwin. Erwin's significance to Slytherin is not that simple now. He is the real prefect of Slytherin. How many people are staring at him? How many people who graduated from Slytherin? Will they let someone insult the real king of Slytherin? Narcissa said, then what should we do? Lucius said, leave it to me. I will arrange it, trust me. Narcissa said, teach them a painful lesson. There is no one else for that child, only us. Lucius hugged Narcissa. Don't worry, I will give him an explanation. I will teach Weasley a lesson. This time, even Dumbledore can't protect them. If it hadn't been for Amelia, the Dark Lord would have we will not withdraw so simply from the matter. Even if we don't mention our original friendship, just say this. I will always be grateful to Amelia. Unfortunately, Erwin's identity cannot be exposed for the time being, otherwise, Weasley the family will definitely bleed this time. Narcissa said, everything must put Erwin's safety first. Lucius nodded. Don't worry, I know. Narcissa broke out of Lucius's arms. Adjusted my clothes. Turned around to leave. Lucius asked, where are you going? Narcissa's face was grim. A pair of eyes full of murderous intent. I'm going to do something that I should have done a long time ago. My surname was Black before. Even if Black has declined, he still doesn't have any strength left. Chapter 133. Lucius did not stop Narcissa. He can't stop this kind of thing. It was obvious that Narcissa was very angry now. Who would stop him at this time? Lucius thought he might sleep in the study for a long time. As for other pure-blood families, they don't know Erwin's life experience. But just because Erwin is about to become the king of Slytherin, they will also take action. Because this is a war that belongs to all Slytherins. At this moment, there is no distinction between blood and family. They only have one name, Slytherin graduates. Even if Erwin lost this weekend, he did not become the true king of Slytherin. But Erwin is also the one closest to that position. It's Slytherin's glory. Just because of this, they will take action. The outside world was turbulent, and Erwin didn't even know it. If he knew, he would definitely stop these losers. Because this matter developed at this pace, it was already beyond Erwin's control. It's a pity that those unlucky children were calling their father without telling Erwin. At this time, our protagonist has finished his day's classes and is going to the auditorium for dinner. On the way to the auditorium, Erwin walked at the front, followed by a group of little snakes. Arrive at the auditorium in great force. In the auditorium, students from several colleges have already taken their seats. Outside the auditorium, Mrs. Molly came with Ron. Mrs. Molly tugged on Ron's arm. Today, you must apologize to Erwin. Ron kept struggling. I won't go. I want to leave Hogwarts. I won't go, Mom. Please take me back. Please. Mrs. Molly's face was cold. Shut up, Ron. Erwin is generous, and he is willing to forgive you. But this does not mean that you can feel at ease and pretend that this thing did not happen. If possible, I really want to take you away. Go back. But Erwin is too generous to ruin your future. You should be grateful instead of acting like this here. Ron heard this. The struggle became even more intense. I won't go, Mom. Please, take me away. Don't let me stay in Hogwarts, I will die. I really will die. Mrs. Molly looked at Ron with disappointment on her face. Ron, you don't even have the courage to take responsibility now. I'm really disappointed in you. Ron begged. Mom, you have all been deceived. He is evil, believe me. I will really die. Mrs. Molly said coldly. Erwin has graciously forgiven you. Do you want to use those words in the afternoon to slander Erwin again? Ron Weasley, I really wish I had never given birth to you. You give me the name Weasley is a disgrace. Ron really couldn't argue. He and Mrs. Molly had already said what Erwin said to him, but what he received was a slap in the face. Mrs. Molly didn't believe it at all. Just pretend that Ron was intentionally seriously injuring Erwin. She was even surprised that her son would think of such a vicious way to slander Erwin. Therefore, Mrs. Molly really didn't want to say a word other than disappointment. Mrs. Molly said, even if you want to leave, you must apologize to Erwin before that. Ron heard this. Hope ignited in my heart. He didn't care about anything else now. He just wanted to leave Hogwarts. What Erwin said he would face in the future was really terrifying. He shuddered just thinking about it. Moreover, his brain, which is not much bigger than almond, can also think that this is true. In the auditorium, the dinner party is almost over. Professor McGonagall saw Mrs. Molly and Ron coming to the door. Professor McGonagall stood up. Advertisement, he knocked on the cup on the table. Quiet. Everyone. All the little wizards looked up. Professor McGonagall said, everyone knows what happened in the auditorium today. Erwin is willing to forgive Mr. Weasley, but I think Mr. Weasley needs to apologize to Erwin. Erwin, what do you think? Woolen cloth? Erwin stood up. Professor, I don't think it's necessary. It's really not a big deal. I believe Ron said it unintentionally. In fact, it is normal for little wizards of our age to have some conflicts. On top of the Slytherin table, all the little snakes looked at Erwin. His eyes were already moist. See? This is their prefect. He has a noble personality and unparalleled strength. Even though Erwin was unhappy all day today, he still faced others with magnanimity. The little snakes saw clearly and knew that their prefect was not in a good mood today. And now, Erwin can actually be so generous. They feel that it is impossible to judge others by oneself. Pansy stood up directly. No, Prefect, Weasley does not deserve to be forgiven. But if you are generous, Prefect, he must also apologize. This is not only for you, Prefect, but also for all of us. Slytherin. The other little snakes also shouted. Yes, he must apologize. We know you are generous, Prefect, but Weasley must apologize. Yes, apologize. Apologize. All the little snakes became excited. The crowd was furious. Students from other colleges also shouted an apology. Outside the auditorium, Ron's face turned green. Professor McGonagall tapped her cup. But that didn't stop these excited little wizards. Erwin raised his hand. Everyone calmed down. The next moment, the little snakes are like pressing the pause button. There was silence, and the other little wizards also shut up. Professor McGonagall breathed a sigh of relief. Ron really made the public angry this time. Erwin was also a little surprised. Are you so embarrassed now? Fortunately, this is not a novel about dynasty fighting for hegemony. Otherwise, it would be a sure thing to die with just one move like this. Professor McGonagall said, Mrs. Molly, bring Mr. Weasley in. All the little wizards turned to look at the door of the auditorium. Mrs. Molly walked into the auditorium with her legs, so frightened that Ron walked into the auditorium. All the little snakes glared at each other, especially the little Slytherin snake. Those eyes looked like they wanted to tear Ron alive. Ron was even more frightened. Mrs. Molly carried Ron Weasley directly to the stage. Throw him right down. Ron didn't stand upright and sat on the ground. Mrs. Molly said coldly, Now. Ron Weasley apologized to Erwin. Ron felt a chill down his back. Stand up quickly. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I apologize. Erwin smiled and stood up. I accept your apology, Ron. As I said, I didn't blame you. You know, just let everything go as it is today. We will be friends in the future, right? Ron looked at Erwin. What Erwin said in the afternoon came to mind inexplicably. I just feel a chill in my heart. Chapter 134. Erwin picked up the water glass on the table. Get on stage. Ron, I don't know why you hate me so much. Maybe there is something wrong with me, but I am willing to change myself. Maybe I accidentally offended you at some point. I am here to apologize to you today. I heard a saying. In ancient Dacia, they would toast when they apologized, which meant that all the grievances would be poured down the throat with the wine, and then they would disappear. We can't drink, so I will use water instead of wine. Ron, are you willing to forgive me? Me. Erwin came to Ron. An imperceptible flash of light flashed in his eyes. Because of the angle, no one else could see Erwin's eyes at this moment. Only Ron saw it clearly. Everyone was admiring Erwin's generosity at this time. All the little snakes were very angry. I don't know why Erwin forgave Ron so easily. And he even ran to apologize to Ron. Draco couldn't help but said, Prefect, you don't need to apologize to him at all. He is obviously jealous of you. He attacks you with vicious words. Other little snakes also said, Yes, it's all his fault. What does it have to do with you? In addition to the little snakes, many students from other colleges also couldn't stand it. That's right. This matter has nothing to do with Erwin. If you ask me, Erwin is too generous. Although he is very noble, he is too easily bullied by others. You're right, just like that guy from the Weasley family this time. Isn't this just bullying Erwin? You don't know that the Cavendi family is very miserable. Erwin's parents have been gone since he was a child. He has developed the Cavendi family to this level by himself. No one in the whole of Renton says anything bad about the Cavendi family. Maybe Erwin has experienced too much, and his character has become so gentle. How pitiful. Is this why these wizards bully him? Many other Muggle wizards were very sympathetic. Many seniors and sisters have experienced this. It's just that the previous perpetrators were all Slytherins. Now that Slytherin has changed for the better, they see the harmony in the wizarding world. As a result, Ron was such a disaster. Hermione clenched her fists and stood up abruptly. It's obviously not Erwin's fault. By pulling Erwin out now, are you forcing Erwin? Are you bullying us wizards from Muggle families? Before I entered Hogwarts, I heard many people have said that only Slytherin students at Hogwarts take the issue of bloodline so seriously and will attack students with bad backgrounds. But after I came to Hogwarts, I found that this was not the case. Slytherin students are very good. They are very proud. But they will not attack others casually. Even when I went to morning self-study with them, their hard work and studiousness were almost the same as our Ravenclaws. And Gryffindor, who was originally praised by everyone, has such a student. He attacks Erwin with such vicious words. Is Hogwarts really fair? Is it because Erwin is generous and forgives him? Doesn't there need to be any other treatment? Can Hogwarts like this really be called a haven for wizards? Isn't this magical world dark? Erwin was shocked. Good guy. This little girl has great fighting ability. It is indeed the best compliment. Erwin had a hard time saying a lot of things because he had to maintain his personality. But Hermione made such a fuss. This matter was immediately raised to a high level. I have to say that what Hermione said was really to Erwin's liking. With these words, Erwin can better achieve his own interests. Advertisement. Erwin looked around calmly from the corner of his eye. With his extraordinary eyesight, Erwin saw a small beetle next to a pillar. The corners of Erwin's mouth raised slightly. Great, the audience has arrived. Next, it's time to continue setting up the character. Professor McGonagall didn't expect Hermione to act like this. There was a moment of embarrassment. Hermione's words were simply heartbreaking, but Hermione's words resonated with many people. Just when Professor McGonagall was in trouble, Erwin turned around and said, "Hermione, don't talk like this. Hogwarts is fair. Forgive Ron. There is no coercion or other reasons. Simply because I really don't think this is anything. It's a big deal, and there's no need for me to ruin Ron's future because of this." Erwin glanced at the small snakes, said, "I told you, everyone makes mistakes. Ron will make mistakes, and I will make mistakes. But everyone has a chance to be forgiven, unless you have done something heinous. But in my opinion, this matter is not heinous. We are all young, so we will speak unscrupulously. When we are angry, we will do things that we regret. But if we are deprived of the opportunity to correct ourselves just because of this, it's unfair. Hogwarts gave me fairness and justice. It gave me a chance to choose. Now, I choose to forgive Ron, just like you may choose to forgive me for any mistakes I make one day in the future." "Me too." All the little snakes looked at each other. Then he bowed slightly. "Yes, Prefect." Hermione wanted to say something else. Erwin shook his head at Hermione. Everyone present noticed Erwin's action. They all praised Erwin for his generosity and gentleman. Watching Erwin control the rhythm in the auditorium, Professor McGonagall breathed a subtle sigh of relief. To be honest, she really has never dealt with such a scene. Lack of experience in handling such situations. Fortunately, Hogwarts has Erwin. Professor McGonagall said, "Thank you, Erwin. If it weren't for you, today's matter would be very difficult to solve." Erwin said, "You are too polite, Professor. They are all my friends, so they are fighting for my injustice. I just hope that the professor will not blame them. After all, they are unintentional. If the professor really wants to blame someone, then please just blame me." Professor McGonagall said, "Why should you blame anyone? I won't blame anyone for this." Erwin bowed slightly. "Thank you, Professor." "Then, can I continue?" Professor McGonagall nodded. "Of course." Erwin looked at Ron. "Well, Ron, let's shake hands and make peace. After today, I believe we will become the best friends." Erwin looked at Ron. There was an unnamed look in his eyes. Ron thought of the reactions of the students in the auditorium just now, and also thought of Erwin's words in the afternoon. "Fear in my heart." Subconsciously, he raised his hand to block Erwin's approach. Chapter 135. Erwin's eyes lit up. "Okay, another knife has arrived." Erwin held Ron's hand directly. With gentle force on his arm, he pulled Ron. Ron was scared and didn't react at all. Erwin pulled his arm directly, pushed directly onto the water glass in Erwin's hand. The next moment, there was a clanking sound, and the water glass in Erwin's hand fell on the steps. The metal made a crisp sound when it came into contact with the ground. The water in the cup spilled out and flowed down the stairs. Erwin took 2 steps back. There was a hint of astonishment on his face. The scene was quiet for a moment. The faces of the professors also changed. Mrs. Molly's face turned cold instantly. All the Slytherin snakes were instantly furious. "Weasley, you are looking for death. How dare you humiliate our prefect like this? Teach him a lesson. Shameless. Damn thing." While talking, a group of little snakes took out their magic wands. The young wizards from other colleges also frowned. Ron really went too far. Hermione was also furious. He took out his wand and pointed it at Ron. "You've gone too far. Erwin has already lowered his dignity and reconciled with you. How dare you push him away? Why do you do so?" Ron was also shocked by this sudden change. He stammered, No, I didn't. It's him." Erwin said, "Ron, I really didn't expect that you would have such great malice towards me. Forget it, since you don't want to reconcile. Then just pretend that I didn't say anything today. I still accept your apology. I will try to avoid provoking you in my future life at Hogwarts. Sorry." As he spoke, Erwin turned his head and looked at the small snakes. "Put down your wands. Hermione too." Pansy said angrily, "Prefect, we can't just let him go. He should learn a lesson." Erwin shook his head. "Forget it. Put down your wands. Everyone sit down. This is the auditorium. This is Hogwarts." I said, "Wands are used to point at enemies, Ron. He is our classmate." Pansy snorted and stamped her foot hard, putting the wand back into his sleeve. All the little snakes had no choice but to put down their wands. Hermione's arm holding the wand was also pressed down by Penelo beside her. Penella whispered. Hermione, the professors are here, and the professors will not let it go. Percy and the Weasley twins were relieved to see everyone put down their wands. George said, Oh my God, is Ron crazy? Fred said, I wouldn't be surprised if someone gave him a curse just now, really? Percy also looked unhappy. He didn't expect that his younger brother would do such a stupid thing. He was also very surprised by Erwin's generosity and could even be said to be a little admired. If he thought about it from his perspective, he really didn't think he could be so generous. However, this younger brother actually did such a stupid thing. The most important thing is that Percy is not sure whether this stupid thing will affect him. Advertisement being elected as a prefect in 5th grade, Percy has a very good plan for his future. With a good reputation and experience as a prefect, he did everything to join the Ministry of Magic. If an idiot like Ron influenced him, he would really go crazy. Mrs. Molly came to Ron's side. No nonsense, just slapped him in the mouth. Ron Weasley, you disappoint me very much. Now, get out of the Great Hall and I will take you home later. You don't deserve to be in Hogwarts. Ron was slapped soberly, but he didn't dare to say a word, as he was the wronged party. He knew very well what had just happened. He was really afraid of Erwin's methods. This was the second time that he was pointed at with a wand by all the little snakes in Slytherin. At that moment, he really thought he was going to die. Ron hurriedly ran out of the auditorium. When passing Slytherin's long table, it was as if he was being stared at by venomous snakes, feeling cold all over the body. Those little snakes looked at him as if they wanted to eat him alive. Erwin said quickly, Madam, it won't happen. It doesn't have to be like this. Mrs. Molly looked at Erwin with distressed eyes. No, kid. He deserves this. He doesn't deserve your forgiveness. I will take him home and teach him how to treat others well. Believe me, I'm sorry, kid. We did something wrong today. I apologize to you on Ron's behalf. Erwin said, How is this possible, madam? This matter has nothing to do with you. Mrs. Molly said, No, I didn't educate him well. Then Mrs. Molly turned to look at Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall, I'm sorry, it's my problem. I will take him home, even if you fire him. I will not complain at all. This is what he deserves. I no longer have the shame to stay here, so I'll leave first. Professor McGonagall sighed. Let's wait until Professor Dumbledore. You can go back first. Mrs. Molly nodded. Then she turned around and left. She felt her face was getting hot even if she stayed in the auditorium for another minute. Erwin looked at Professor McGonagall and said, Sorry, Professor. I messed up. Professor McGonagall said, No, Erwin, this has nothing to do with you. You don't need to put all the problems on you. We all know that you are excellent and generous, but forget it. Let's go back first. There will be evening self-study later. Erwin nodded. Snape sat in his seat. His fingers traced his chin. There was a look of understanding on his face. He seemed to have guessed that Erwin was doing all this. After all, his attention was always on Erwin, and he noticed some of Erwin's small movements, including Erwin gently pulling Ron, guiding Ron's hand to push the water glass in Erwin's hand. However, he didn't understand Erwin's purpose. However, he will not ask more questions. As long as Erwin is willing, he will not say a word. He is even willing to help Erwin if Erwin needs it. No matter what Erwin's purpose was, this is what he owes Erwin. Or in other words, this is what he owes Erwin's parents. Erwin returned to the Slytherin table. Professor McGonagall said, Okay, get ready and go to evening study. Just then, a voice came. Wait a minute, Professor McGonagall, I have a question. Erwin looked around. It was Charlotte who stood up. Erwin was confused. What did Charlotte want to do? Professor McGonagall said, Miss Teresa, what can I do for you? Charlotte said, Professor McGonagall, I remember that Hogwarts had a custom long ago. If there is any conflict between students, they can apply to the dean to start a duel challenge, right? Chapter 136. Professor McGonagall was stunned for a moment. Snape was also a little confused. I don't know what Charlotte plans to do. Erwin really didn't know there was such a thing. The original novel really never mentioned this. Professor McGonagall said, It seems that Miss Teresa has done some research on the history of Hogwarts. Indeed, Hogwarts has this tradition, but few people will challenge duels. But this rule does exist. As long as they are not facing each other in life or death, and if the two are of the same level, they can resolve the conflict through a duel challenge. Charlotte nodded. Okay, then I, Charlotte Teresa, from Slytherin House will challenge George Weasley and Fred Weasley to a duel under the witness of all the professors. Erwin's eyes widened. George and Fred were also shocked. The twins looked at each other. George whispered, "Can you win?" Fred was shocked. "Fight her? Have you never seen her fight with Erwin? How do you fight like this? Break the wand and throw her eyes out?" George smiled bitterly. "Can we refuse?" Professor McGonagall shook her head. "No, the duel challenge cannot be refused." Charlotte said, "Your brother insulted our prefect, so the Weasley family needs someone to foot the bill. Don't worry, your lives will not be in danger. I just need to let some people know that the Slytherin prefect is not. It's okay to be insulted." Erwin wanted to stop it. After all, Erwin really didn't think it was interesting when he wasn't pretending to compete. Grodia pulled Erwin's sleeve. "Don't worry, Erwin. This is not just for you. This is for the entire Slytherin." Erwin wondered, "Is this agreed upon?" Grodia nodded. "Yeah, Slytherin has been silent for too long, and you are too easygoing. So, you need someone to help you do the things you are too lazy to do." Erwin understood, so his matter was a primer. The bottom line is that the Slytherins want to show off their fists. Erwin didn't bother to care anymore. "Just go as you like." Professor McGonagall turned to look at Snape. Snape stood up. "The duel challenge has been established. You will have a duel under the witness of Professor McGonagall and me." Professor McGonagall said, "As the challenged, you two can choose the time and place." George and Fred had expressions of despair. There is no way they can be Charlotte's opponents. Too bad. Although the qualifications of both of them are also excellent. But ask yourself, after seeing Charlotte's actions, they are not on the same level at all. Just then, another figure stood up. Marcus Flint. I belong to Slytherin House, and I will challenge Gryffindor Percy Weasley to a duel under the witness of all professors." Erwin's eyes widened. He looked at Grodia beside him. "Is this what you guys have agreed upon?" Grodia nodded. "Yeah, if I hadn't been in 7th grade, I would have personally taught him a lesson. The Weasley family needs to be taught a lesson. Anyone who belongs to the Weasley family must be taught a lesson." Erwin sighed in his mind that Ginny was lucky. Fortunately, he was born a year late, and fortunately Ron, an idiot, gave him the knife in the 1st grade. Otherwise, poor little girl Ginny will have to be beaten by Erwin. Percy stood up with an ugly face. "I accept your challenge." A sinister smile appeared on Marcus's face, and his braces shone with a cold light. Erwin whispered, "Can Marcus do it? Percy is a prefect after all." Grodia said disdainfully, "His prefect is just because he knows how to play both sides. As for his strength, it's really not that good." Erwin thought about this thing in the original novel. Advertisement. It seems that there is really no detailed description of the strength of this product. It seems that all the talents are devoted to gaining power. When Dumbledore lost power, he even severed ties with the Weasley family. The ambition is quite high, which suits Slytherin quite well. As for strength, I don't know, Grodia said. Also, don't underestimate Marcus just because he has no power to fight back in front of you. He is a descendant of the Flint family. As we all know, when Ursula Flint married gave it to Phineas, the most unpopular headmaster in the history of Hogwarts, and you are very familiar with that headmaster. He advocates black magic and believes that the best attack is defense, and the person he can choose to be his wife is naturally one of his comrades, so the Flint family is very strong in the study of black magic. There are rumors that Marcus will enhance his strength through actual combat during his vacation. If you hadn't used your magic power to subdue him that day, if so, believe me, he will bring you some trouble. Erwin suddenly realized that there was such a thing. In this way, it seems that this ugly guy with buck teeth is really not that simple. Strengthen your strength through actual combat? Interesting. If it's true what Glodia said, isn't this Marcus a good knife? No brains, but strong. No one knows the course of the duel. Because duels are conducted in private. Erwin didn't know it was such a rule. Or, the person concerned wants to do it privately. Anyway, during evening self-study time, Charlotte and Marcus returned to the study room one after another. Charlotte looked calm. Sitting in my seat, I looked very comfortable. As for Marcus, his robe was stained with some dust. Erwin didn't ask them how the battle was going, because Erwin has a better way to prove it. At breakfast the next day, Erwin looked at the Gryffindor table. The Weasley trio still had bruises on their faces. Erwin knew the result. Charlotte and Marcus won. And it was a big win. His face was bruised. And this became the first Halloween gift Erwin received. Although, it seems that there are no gifts for Halloween. There is nothing worth saying about the one-day course. Erwin was used to Neville turning potions into offensive weapons. Ron, on the other hand, disappeared into Hogwarts. Of course, this is not a complete disappearance, because Erwin knows one thing very well. Dumbledore wouldn't let Ron be expelled so easily. This has nothing to do with Ron's own value, because his last name is Weasley. So for Weasley's sake, Dumbledore would also help Paul. I just don't know how Dumbledore will save it. During the dinner, Erwin's second pleasure came. At noon, Erwin asked the elf to make him a bowl of noodles. He actually wanted to eat boiled fish, but in the end I gave up because the noodles tasted faster. He has not forgotten that today Hogwarts will welcome a cute little thing, a troll. Chapter 137. Erwin is really interested in trolls. In the original book, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the troll is described as a terrifying creature, standing over 12 feet tall and weighing in at 1 ton. According to Newt, trolls are powerful and unpredictable creatures that are also violent and stupid. But there are different definitions of whether trolls are magical animals or beasts. In the earliest definition of wizards, wizards once divided all living things into 2 types. The first is human beings, and the second is beasts. The beasts that are different from humans are all creatures that walk on 4 legs or have wings for flying or crawling, collectively called beasts. However, later, because the trolls were so stupid, the goblins used the trolls as an example to overturn the wizards' classification of humans and beasts. Finally, the current setting of Fantastic Beasts was created. However, it has always been unclear whether the troll is a wild beast or a magical animal. And the reason why Erwin is very interested in trolls. There are mainly 2 reasons. First, Erwin wants to try whether his golden talent is useful against trolls. If this is useful, the giant monster may become an assistant to Erwin. The second reason actually has the same purpose as the first reason. The troll is stupid, has a low IQ, and is impulsive and irritable. Why is this so similar to Ron's image? Erwin is really not Black Ron. You see, the troll has a low IQ, is impulsive, violent, and is obsessed with violence. Isn't this Ron? I don't like to use my brain, but my level is quite low. At this moment, the figures of Ron and the troll perfectly overlapped. The most important thing is that they look similar. Shaking his head, Erwin got rid of all the negative thoughts in his mind. Moving on to the troll question. The troll is stupid, which means it is easy to use. Erwin has big plans, so he hopes to use all the power he can. Although the troll is stupid, the thing that hits you is quite painful. High magic resistance and high attack power. If you let it use your brain, you are forcing yourself to do something difficult. But if used correctly, these trolls will become very suitable thugs. Imagine, if possible, gathering a bunch of trolls to invade the manor of those pure-blood families. The big wooden sticks were swinging, and even Erwin thought it should be very pleasing to the eye. Rivers should have a common language with these giant monsters. However, Erwin still needs to use some means, or in other words, do some experiments on how to operate it. And this troll, deliberately released by Voldemort to attract attention, will become Erwin's best experimental subject. Erwin finished the bowl of seaweed and egg drop soup. He rubbed his slightly stretched belly. Look towards the door of the auditorium. Why are you so slow? It will be time for self-study in the evening. Neither can Quirrell. Just when Erwin was arranging Quirrell in his mind, Quirrell burst into the great hall. There was still some blood stains on his body. Troll. There's a troll in the underground classroom. There was a sudden silence in the auditorium. Professor McGonagall's face turned pale. If Erwin hadn't known the plot, it really took Professor Quirrell to fool him. Sure enough, no one who can be a bad guy has poor acting skills. Apart from that, his acting skills are very good, but he is a good person. After Professor Quirrell finished speaking, he stumbled and fell directly to the ground. The second before pretending to faint, Professor Quirrell gave Erwin a secret look. Erwin understood. Professor Quirrell asked Erwin not to participate. Unfortunately, this time, Erwin will not go as Professor Quirrell wishes. Erwin looked towards the podium. On the podium, the expressions of all the professors changed drastically. A murderous look flashed across Snape's face. Then he flicked his robe and left quickly through the small door on the side of the auditorium. The next moment, there was a burst of panicked exclamations throughout the auditorium. All the little wizards were frightened. The little snakes in Slytherin were very calm, although there was a look of panic on his face. But there was no yelling. Instead, he focused his attention on Erwin. Erwin frowned. It's just that the other little wizards are too noisy. Professor McGonagall shouted, "Quiet!" The little wizards stopped making noise when they heard Professor McGonagall's voice. Professor McGonagall said, "The evening self-study is cancelled. Prefects of each college, take your students back to the common room. All professors are dispersed to each college and guard the door of the common room." With Professor McGonagall taking the lead, the panic quickly subsided. The little snakes continued to look at Erwin, waiting for Erwin to give the order. Erwin said, "Senior Glodia, you take the 7th grade seniors in front, and all the hidden seniors are behind. No one is allowed to fall behind. Take everyone back to the common room first." Glodia nodded. "Okay." Afterwards, all the little wizards in the auditorium left one after another. The professors ignored them and hurried out of the auditorium. A troll appears in the castle. Although that thing is really not a threat in front of these professors, but for these little wizards, it can be said to be a disaster. And after the little snakes left, Erwin snapped his fingers. The next moment, Erwin appeared directly in the corridor of the castle's underground classroom. I thought about the plot in the original work. If I remember correctly, that thing seems to be over there in the girls' bathroom. He is still a blind troll, running to the women's restroom without incident. Erwin checked the direction, walking towards the girls' restroom. Why don't you twitch your nose and see if you can smell the smell of the troll? However, Erwin didn't find the troll until he came to the door of the girls' bathroom. Erwin was confused. Did you come a little too quickly? That thing hasn't come here yet? That's not right. According to normal thinking, that thing should be wandering in the corridor. Then when Harry Potter and the others came over, they would just stroll to the girls' bathroom. But Erwin wandered around the corridor and was pretty sure it wasn't here. Could it be possible that he operat and went astray? Erwin couldn't figure out what went wrong for a moment. Just planned to wait. It might be here soon. Erwin casually tugged at the jack-o'-lantern in the corridor with his fingers. The pumpkin lantern swayed gently. The light swayed, whether it was bright or dark. Suddenly, Erwin's hand stopped moving. He keenly smelled a stink and floated over. Erwin stopped moving his hands. Eyes instantly lit up. This smell, this stink. That's right. It's the same as recorded in the original work. The appearance of a troll is always accompanied by bursts of stench. Erwin raised the corners of his mouth. He said to himself, "Little cutie, I'm here to do an experiment with you." Chapter 138. Erwin walked directly towards the end of the corridor. The further we walked, the stronger the stench became. On the wall, a huge shadow has appeared. It was the giant monster. Erwin stopped, turned his wrist, and the wand appeared directly in his hand. I have a lot of time to wait for the giant monster to appear. In the corridor, the sound of heavy footsteps was getting closer and closer. Soon, a gray-skinned giant carrying a big wooden stick appeared in front of Erwin. Erwin waved his hand, as if intending to dispel the stench in front of him. "Hello, big guy." The troll's little brain was also stunned for a moment after seeing Erwin. Obviously, it didn't expect to meet someone around the corner. Erwin watched the troll's reaction. I want to see if my affinity with magical animals is useful. Looking at the giant monster that had not launched an attack for the time being, Erwin's eyes lit up. There seems to be some drama. However, the next moment, the giant monster suddenly screamed. He raised the big stick and hit Erwin directly with the stick. Erwin took a few steps back. The big wooden stick fell to the ground. There was a loud bang. Erwin understood. This guy just didn't react. It's not that my golden talent has taken effect. Erwin was a little disappointed. Therefore, this thing does not belong to magical animals. It seems that to conquer this thing, it is not easy to rely on the power of the king. Erwin shook his head. Okay, the first experiment is done. Then it's time for the second experiment. Erwin flicked his wand. Shattered to pieces. The magic spell flew out from the wand and hit the troll's chest directly. The troll was knocked back 2 steps. Erwin's eyes lit up. Sure enough, this thing's magic immunity ability is a bit strong. The giant monster was repulsed and roared angrily. Then he raised the wooden stick and hit Erwin. I can't let you smash it again. The noise is too big. Don't attract the professors here before I finish the experiment. The next moment, Erwin waved his magic wand. Used the silent disarming spell. The wooden stick in the troll's hand flew directly out of the troll's hand. The troll was stunned for a moment. He looked at his empty hands. Then he looked at the wooden stick that fell on the wall. Small head, big doubts. The corner of Erwin's mouth raised. Then, let's start the next round of experiments. Shattered to pieces, broken to pieces. Erwin used it 5 times in succession. Shoot towards the troll's limbs and head. The giant monster was hit and screamed in pain. Erwin looked at the troll, fumbling at his chin. The defense of the head is obviously against the limbs and chest. Is it because the skin on the head is thin? Therefore, his initial guess was right. Does the troll's magic immunity mainly come from its skin? In that case, Erwin's bulletproof vest plan can actually be considered. It's a pity that we are in Hogwarts now, and there are many experiments that cannot be done. However, Erwin also identified a research direction. Advertisement. I'll wait until the holidays and catch a troll to see if this thing is resistant to the death curse. Erwin directly used the levitating spell to levitate the troll's big wooden stick. Then the spell was lifted, and the wooden stick hit the giant monster directly on the head. The troll rolled his eyes and fainted. Erwin certainly had a better way to deal with it. For example, with Shan Feng Wu Ying, Erwin can directly achieve the effect of the owl's head. But this is Hogwarts after all. Erwin is a kind person in the eyes of others. You can't ruin your character and do such a bloody thing. Harry's method in the original book was good, very effective. After doing all this, Erwin listened to the messy footsteps approaching. I have no intention of staying here to express my thoughts. He had another fun event to rush to see. I don't know if our poor Sri Lankan teacher was bitten by a dog at this time. It's pitiful to think about it. A bite of such a big dog's head must be very painful. His poor godfather. Erwin snapped his fingers and went directly to the corridor on the 3rd floor of the castle. Not long after Erwin left. As soon as Zillion dispersed, Professor McGonagall came here with several professors. Saw the troll lying on the ground. Professor McGonagall was startled. Who took action to get rid of the troll? Several other professors shook their heads. Don't know what's going on. Professor McGonagall didn't think much and started finishing work. And who defeated the troll has become another unsolved mystery in Hogwarts. Erwin didn't know anything about this. He was just doing an experiment. A vortex appeared, and Erwin appeared in the corridor on the 3rd floor. After landing, Erwin looked around very quiet. It was dark and made no special sound. Just then, a voice suddenly sounded behind Erwin. Are you looking for me? My godson. Erwin was startled. Godfather, if you scare someone, you will scare them to death. Snape was leaning against a pillar in the corridor, his figure hidden by his black robes. In the darkness, it was impossible to see his figure clearly. Just a bunch. Thieves are scary. Snape said coldly, didn't anyone tell you that before you activate the apparition, you can control the delay to observe the nearby environment? Erwin was stunned for a moment. Can it still be like this? No wonder. In the original book, there is no such thing as the wizard directly colliding with people after operating. There is no unlucky person who appears in the middle of a battle between two wizards and is washed away by messy spells such as the death curse. It can still be like this. Erwin really doesn't know this, and the system doesn't teach him. Erwin said, I know, Godfather. I will pay attention to it in the future. Snape said, So, why do you appear here at this time? Erwin said, Nothing. I was just taking a walk. Snape said coldly, It seems that you know something that you shouldn't know. Do you have any agreement with Dumbledore? In exchange for the permission to disembark at Hogwarts? Erwin said, It doesn't matter. Dumbledore wanted me to tutor Harry Potter. That's why I made this request. After all what happened in the corridor last time, I think Apparition's life-saving ability is relatively strong. Snape nodded. Remember what I told you. Never trust Dumbledore. Erwin said. I remember. Erwin's nose twitched slightly, and he smelled some blood. Erwin asked, Godfather, are you injured? Snape said, It's okay. It's a small problem. You can go back first. Erwin didn't say much. It was obvious that Snape didn't intend to involve him. Erwin didn't want to get involved in the current situation. So both of them know some things, but they just won't put it out in the open. Chapter 139. Oh, my dear cat lady. Hogwarts is wonderful because of you. After returning to the Slytherin common room, beside the fireplace, a group of little snakes were chatting. See Erwin coming back. Everyone said hello quickly. Prefect, you are back. Prefect, have you gone to deal with the troll? All the little snakes asked excitedly. After they came back, they found that Erwin was not there, and they knew that Erwin was designated to deal with the troll. As for Erwin's safety, these little snakes are not worried. After all, in the eyes of these little snakes, even if Erwin now faces Dumbledore, Erwin will win. I have to say that chasing stars is blind. Erwin said, No, I just want to do some other things. There is no night study today, but you don't indulge yourselves and read a book. Don't chat all the time. The faces of all the little snakes suddenly turned bitter, but he didn't dare to refute. Obediently picked up the book and started reading. Erwin was very satisfied. Looking at the furnishings in the Slytherin common room, Erwin thinks that some bookshelves should be arranged. Put some books on the table so that if this happens again, these little snakes don't have to waste their time. Sure enough, he is really a good person. Erwin has paid a lot for the learning of these little snakes. After returning to his dormitory, Erwin communicated with the purple lotus mark on his arm. Soon old Tom's voice came. Master, Erwin asked, "Is everything arranged?" Old Tom said, "Everything has been arranged. Don't worry, young master." The corner of Erwin's mouth raised. "That's okay. After 2 days, public opinion spreads. Let's start the next step." "Yes, master." After disconnecting, Erwin was lying on the bed. Tomorrow is a big day. If nothing unexpected happens, Erwin will gain a lot of reputation tomorrow. Erwin closed his eyes and soon fell into a deep sleep. The next day, sitting in the Transfiguration classroom, Erwin opened his personal panel. Look at the reputation value column at the bottom. 5,700. The next second, numbers change. 5,710, 5,720. Soon, the reputation value exceeded the 6,000 mark. Erwin raised the corners of his mouth and started. Professor McGonagall walked into the classroom. "Get ready to start class." Erwin closed the system panel. What a beautiful day. And this time happens to be the time when the New Day Daily Prophet goes on sale. At noon, at the entrance of the auditorium, Hermione stood by the door, waiting for Erwin. Not long after, Erwin came over with a large number of small snakes. Hermione ran over quickly. "Come to Erwin's side." The little snakes didn't say much. Advertisement, after all. They all now know that Hermione has a good relationship with her prefect. The most important thing is that Hermione is really better than them all when it comes to studying. So it is completely different from the original work. The little snakes are not hostile to her. And with Hermione was Harry Potter. Seeing Harry Potter, Erwin obviously felt that Malfoy was very excited. "What a pure friendship," Erwin asked. "If you don't go in to eat, why don't you wait here for me?" Hermione said, "Don't you know? You didn't read today's Daily Prophet?" Erwin shook his head. "No, we just finished class, and Professor Flitwick has been dragging the class for a while today." "What's wrong?" Hermione said. "I don't know who exposed the matter of Ron pushing you that day, and there was a complete process, including Ron scolding you. There are other Weasleys. His father was the Ministry of Magic, suspended them for investigation, and his 2 brothers who have graduated also have some problems." Erwin was startled. He swore to God that this was really not an act, because he was really confused. This is different from Erwin's original plan. Regarding Ron, of course Erwin deliberately let people expose it. In fact, this matter is very simple. You only need to ask old Tom to send a letter anonymously to the Beetle reporter Rita and tell him about Hogwarts. She will dig out the hard stuff herself. After all, this person has a bad reputation in the journalist community, and he attracts attention with all kinds of nonsense and distorted news. There is no doubt that the Hogwarts scandal made this Beetle reporter act like a shark that smelled blood and couldn't wait to bite him. But, he swore to God, the Weasley family's affairs had nothing to do with him. Erwin asked, "What's going on?" Hermione said, "I guessed you would ask. See for yourself." With that said, Hermione handed a newspaper to Erwin. On the front page of the newspaper, it's Erwin's moving photo. The scene inside was the water glass in Erwin's hand being pushed down. The shock in Erwin's eyes was also shown in a close-up. To be honest, Erwin really doesn't know how the Beetle reporter took this photo. Could it be possible that this guy turned into a beetle and had a smaller version of the camera? Anyway, it's amazing. Erwin looked at it casually. Just as Erwin thought, in the full report, the Beetle reporter packaged Erwin into a poor little wizard who was bullied by school. The main space is used to criticize Dumbledore and Weasley. Of course, this was what Erwin had planned. Having read the original work, Erwin knew this Beetle reporter very well. This guy likes to attract attention. The report she wrote attracted people's attention because her reports were highly controversial. And the current value of Erwin is obviously not as good as Dumbledore and the Weasley family, which have long been famous in the wizarding world. Therefore, Erwin guessed from the beginning that Rita had designated this report to be written around criticizing Dumbledore and Weasley. And if you want to do this, you must make Erwin's image into a pitiful person. Only in this way will everyone feel distressed. Let others relate to bashing Dumbledore and Weasley. What really interested Erwin was the record on the next section. Yesterday, Halloween Day, Arthur Weasley was suspended by the Ministry of Magic for investigation on the grounds of illegal research into modifying Muggle items. The accompanying picture is Arthur Weasley's old car. Erwin then looked back and saw another section. It writes about a fire dragon research institute in Romania, where a Norwegian Spinosaurus suddenly went crazy and injured several people. There is also a list of the injured below, and Charlie Weasley's name appears prominently among them. Erwin frowned slightly, turned the other side of the newspaper, saw another message. Also yesterday, a Gringotts curse-breaking team was attacked in Albania. Due to the vigorous resistance of the team's curse-breakers, those curse-breakers did not die, but they all suffered some injuries. On the injured list below, Another member of the Weasley family also appeared. Bill Weasley. Chapter 140. Erwin carefully read every piece of information in the newspaper, afraid of missing a piece of information. His face darkened visibly. It wasn't that he was in a bad mood because of the misfortune that had befallen the Weasley family. On the contrary, in fact, if the Weasley family was cleaned up, Erwin was still very happy. However, Erwin didn't want to deal with it like this, especially since Erwin just had a conflict with the Weasley family. Then, something like this happened. Anyone with a brain would immediately suspect Erwin. This is not good news. Erwin knew very well that the above matters had nothing to do with him. But who would believe him if he said this? Anyway, put yourself in someone else's shoes. If Erwin heard such a thing, he would immediately doubt himself. This is the worst. There is a saying that goes well, the truth is in the hands of those in high positions. In the magic world, there are more ordinary wizards. If someone incites him at this time, Erwin's reputation will instantly drop to a freezing point. Moreover, this already conflicts with Erwin's ideas. What happened today, if Erwin can't prove his innocence? If nothing else, his future plans will be affected a lot. The first thing that bears the brunt is Erwin's character problem. The persona Erwin created for himself was that of a wretch. He was the one being bullied, and then this persona was just established. Is the Weasley family in trouble? Who would believe that Erwin is the unlucky guy? After this, many of Erwin's plans will have big problems. The most important thing is that Erwin is now afraid that if this matter really happens to Erwin, it will arouse the vigilance of many targets that Erwin originally planned to deal with. This would put a stop to many of Erwin's future plans. Thinking of this, Erwin cursed inwardly. Damn it! Who is it? Is it someone who has a grudge against the Weasley family and is taking this opportunity to take action? This was Erwin's first thought. As Dumbledore's loyal dog, the Weasley family has actually had many enemies over the years. Of course, this was not their fault, but those who wanted to deal with Dumbledore would not let the Weasley family go. Although our first white wizard is famous in the magic world, but the same goes for him, the higher he stands, the more people will want to take action against him. Let's not talk about anything else, just talk about the current Minister of Magic, who has been eyeing Dumbledore for a long time. It's just that the guy is too cowardly to dare to break up with Dumbledore. But who knows whether he will seize this opportunity to attack Dumbledore. Erwin's mind was racing. Something doesn't seem right. Cornelius Fudge doesn't seem to have the brains. If he really had this intention, he wouldn't be in this situation now. Erwin ventured into the magical world, and it was impossible not to do his homework in advance. Although Cornelius Fudge is the Minister of Magic in name only, because of Dumbledore's existence, therefore, the minister's voice in the Ministry of Magic is not high. In other words, there are really not many people he can control. Many people were dissatisfied with him. Advertisement: if this guy really had this kind of brain, he wouldn't be like this a long time ago. The most important thing is that Cornelius Fudge is a loyal pursuit of blood. Therefore, he specified that he would not help Erwin vent his anger, even if he could take the opportunity to attack Dumbledore. Moreover, if this guy really had the brains to seize this opportunity, he would not have known that this matter would not bring down Dumbledore, nor would it harm the Weasley family. Even if it is really exposed, he will not be able to sit in this position. No matter how he thought about it, he would never do such a thing. Erwin thought for a moment. He was stunned for a moment. He seemed to have overlooked one thing. Those are the little snakes of Slytherin. He ignored the power of these little snakes. Erwin was not unaware of his current reputation in Slytherin. It's just that he has never used this reputation. Naturally, I didn't think in this direction. If the four houses of Hogwarts are the most united, Slytherin is definitely on the list. These little snakes might really turn to their own families for Erwin. The only question is why these pureblood families came to help Erwin. Is it because of the glory of Slytherin? Or is it because of my father? Erwin has always been a smart guy. Through some things, he can easily connect the situation. If Erwin's thoughts are true, then these little snakes have really brought Erwin a big trouble. During lunchtime, Erwin took 2 hasty bites. My mind has not been on eating. No matter who takes action, what Erwin needs to consider now is what consequences this matter will bring to him. Reputation, as well as personality, will be the first to be affected. This is the most annoying. God knows how much thought Erwin put into creating this character. The ultimate goal is to use this persona to find a reason to attack some people. If this persona collapses, Erwin will no longer be able to occupy most people's side, and he will be constrained in doing things. What made him most uncomfortable was that he couldn't blame anyone for this matter, because they are also helping Erwin vent his anger, right? All the little snakes also noticed that Erwin's face had always been ugly. Draco bravely came over and said, Prefect, aren't you happy? Erwin asked. Draco, let me ask you. Did you contact the Weasley family about the matter? Draco's face stiffened. Erwin said, I don't like lies, no matter what the reason is. Draco said quickly, Sorry, Prefect, we didn't want to hide it from you. We were just angry, so we wrote a letter home. Erwin sighed. Sure enough, it was these little snakes that exerted their strength, but at the same time Erwin felt relieved. Since it was done by these little snakes, it is much simpler behind it. At least there is less calculation. This can be regarded as saving some trouble. Erwin asked, Who has contacted the family? Draco scratched his head. Everyone. Erwin was stunned for a moment. Huh? What do you mean? Draco said, That is, everyone who can help has contacted the family. There should be owls visiting the existing pure-blood families. Erwin was shocked. If you are tired, just destroy it. When your children are older, they will have their own ideas. Even Erwin couldn't imagine how powerful all the little snakes in Slytherin could be together. Erwin felt that he was wrong. He ignored the power of these little snakes. What a huge amount of energy it takes to clean up everyone in the Weasley family in just one day. Chapter 141. Draco asked carefully, Prefect, did we do something wrong? What can Erwin say? Do you blame these little snakes? Who will dare to help you in the future? Erwin said, No, Draco. Thank everyone for me. I am honored to be your prefect. I am also honored that you will help me. However, if you can, I can trouble you to write to your family again. A letter to ask them to stop targeting the Weasley family? Draco wondered. Why? Those red-haired idiots insulted you, and they deserve everything now. I even don't understand why I didn't kill them directly. Draco was filled with indignation, extremely angry. The same goes for other little snakes. Erwin said, No, Draco. As I said, everyone should have a chance to correct their mistakes, and even if Ron made a mistake, he shouldn't take it out on others, right? In this case, it shouldn't be deal with it this way. The noble Slytherin should know how to be generous. So Draco, are you willing to help me again? Draco sighed. Okay. As you wish, Prefect. I will write to my father. Erwin looked at Draco. I hope it's now. Erwin took out his quill and letter paper and placed them in front of Draco. Draco was helpless. Okay, Prefect. I'm willing to serve you. Erwin nodded with satisfaction. Then he looked at the other little snakes. What about you? The other little snakes reluctantly took the letter paper from Erwin and started writing letters. Erwin was shocked, looking at a group of little snakes writing letters. This number of people is a bit scary. Rubbing his temples, Erwin only felt a headache. He still had to find a way to finish it off. Just then, Snape came to the Slytherin table. He glanced at the little snakes who were writing letters at their desks. Erwin, follow me. Erwin stood up and followed Snape out of the Great Hall. In Snape's office, Snape said, Did you do it? Erwin shook his head. No, they did it spontaneously. Snape said, There will be trouble. Erwin sighed. I know. Snape thought for a moment. Maximize profits. If it cannot be handled properly. Erwin spread his hands. I can't think of a way to deal with it. The speed of action is too fast. No matter what, I can't stay out of it. If I say that these people are spontaneous, it doesn't matter whether anyone will believe it. Even if others believe it, they will. I feel that I am transferring responsibility. The most important thing is that it may make the people who took action this time dissatisfied. If I don't speak up and everyone speaks out, I will probably become a conspirator. The most important thing is that some people will think that if you can use thunderous methods against the Weasley family, you can do the same to others, and it is easy for many people who are overly aware of the crisis to become wary. Snape nodded. What is your purpose? Erwin said, I want to accumulate my own power. Snape thought for a moment and understood what Erwin said. Advertisement, you want to take advantage of the Weasley family? Or take advantage of their guilt? Erwin nodded. Yes. Snape said, It's a very clever method, but now it seems that you messed up. Erwin smiled bitterly. He also knew that he had messed up. He did a lot of calculations, but he just didn't expect that these little snakes would collectively call him father. The key is, these dads act too quickly and their methods are too outrageous. The entire Weasley family was attacked at the same time. The three brothers who attended Hogwarts were all beaten by Charlotte. It can be said that except for Mrs. Molly, the whole family is in trouble. Not to mention taking advantage of the Weasley family's guilt. If the Weasley family felt that this matter had anything to do with Erwin, they would hate Erwin to death. Snape said, You overlooked one thing. Erwin wondered. What? Your parents? Erwin was surprised. My parents? What does this have to do with my parents? Snape said, don't you think that your parents really left you nothing? You should already know that your parents were once students at Hogwarts. Erwin nodded. I know. Snape said, the greatest wealth left by your parents is their connections. If you want the Weasley family to be your help, you don't actually need to waste so many things. They are willing to risk their lives to help you, because your father once saved Arthur Weasley's life. At the hands of 3 Death Eaters, Erwin's eyes widened. My father, did you save Mr. Arthur's life? Snape nodded. To be precise, your father has helped many people, and they will all help you. I should have told you earlier. Erwin looked at Snape. So, Godfather, are you too? Snape hesitated, then nodded. Yes, me too. If it weren't for your father, I would have died a long time ago. I underestimated you and didn't expect you to start accumulating your own power so early, so I didn't tell you. You should have told me your story earlier. Planned. Erwin said nothing. In fact, he never trusted Snape. In other words, his character and experience caused Erwin not to trust anyone easily. The reason why he started to trust Snape now was because of Snape's attitude towards him and all the things that happened during the beginning of school. Erwin said, so, the reason why these pureblood families help me is because of my parents. Snape shook his head. Most of them are not, because your identity will not be known to so many people. You should know that no one is perfect. How many people like your father, there will be how many people want him as his only son. If your identity is exposed, there will be a large number of contacts waiting for you, and there will also be a large number of enemies. Most of the people who help you should be because you are the quasi-prefect of Slytherin. I told you before that as the true prefect of Slytherin, this identity is watched by too many people. You will bring an end to all Slytherin graduates. This was not the first time Erwin heard these words from Snape's mouth. Only, this time, Erwin began to pay attention to it like never before. Snape said, okay, it's actually relatively simple to solve your current problem. You can't solve it, at least you can't do it now, but someone can solve it. Erwin wondered. Who? Snape said, whoever takes action will solve it. As long as someone takes the responsibility for this matter, everyone will naturally look away from you. Erwin said, there are almost no people who are willing to do this kind of thing. Even those pure-blood families will not openly be enemies of Dumbledore. Chapter 142. Snape said, the average family really doesn't do it, but there is one person who does. Now, you need to write a letter. Erwin asked, write a letter? To whom? Lucius Malfoy. Erwin was stunned for a moment. Head of the Malfoy family? Snape nodded. Yes, the Malfoy family is one of the 28 pure-blood families. Now, it is the pure-blood family with the most powerful control. Lucius has many methods, so the family's power is the most complete. Only he can contact the dark wizards who dare to attack the curse-breaking team. Moreover, the Malfoy family has the highest proportion in the Fire Dragon Research Institute in Romania. Erwin said, so, you mean, the Malfoy family is the one who attacked the Weasley family this time? Snape shook his head. It's not accurate. To be precise, the Malfoy family is the leader, and others just follow suit. The Malfoy family is the main force. The most important thing is the grievances between the Malfoy family and the Weasley family. It's very deep, so if he comes out to take this matter up, no one will think there's anything wrong. Others will even think it's reasonable. Erwin said, what is the reason why the Malfoy family came to help me? They should not be the kind of people who can put family interests behind the Slytherin prefects. Snape said, Lucius knows your identity. Similarly, the relationship between your father and mother and the Malfoys is beyond your imagination. Specifically, you will know when you have the opportunity to meet them. Now, write a letter. Erwin picked up the quill on the table. What should I write? To be honest, Erwin really didn't know how to write. Snape said, just tell him the dilemma you are facing now. Don't think about anything else. Just ask him for help. He will arrange the rest by himself. Erwin nodded. Then he wrote on the letter paper. Not long after, the letter was finished. Snape picked it up and looked at it. Nodding. I will send it to Lucius tomorrow. Erwin wondered. Why wait until tomorrow? A cold light flashed in Snape's eyes. Because the Weasley family needs a day to repent. Moreover, Dumbledore will come back today, and he will look for you. Erwin was stunned for a moment. What do you mean? Snape nodded. Dumbledore can't come forward for many things, so he can only come to you. I don't think I need to teach you the rest. Erwin understood. Well, I know. Snape waved his hand. Go and have a rest. There are still classes in the afternoon. If you can't sleep after the evening self-study, come to my office and help me deal with the potion materials. You are sleeping very late at your age. It is better to spend the night at Hogwarts. Why don't you come and do something while traveling? The corners of Erwin's mouth twitched slightly. He's not a human being, he's not a robot. He'll get tired too. But forget it. He is a person who loves to learn. Erwin nodded. I know. After leaving Snape's office, Erwin sorted out Snape's words in his mind. He couldn't think of a way to deal with this matter today, mainly because of the asymmetry of information. If he had known that his parents had left him these connections, Erwin's layout could have been simpler. You don't have to think about so many things. So, it's all Snape's fault. Who made my Bat professor unable to speak clearly? From this point of view, the Weasley family and the Malfoy family are allies. It's just that I don't know who else from other families can be used. Erwin certainly wouldn't think that relying on the connections left by his parents would stop him from planning. The Malfoy family and the Weasley family recognize this favor, but who knows about other families? The most important thing is that Snape has already said that in addition to families with kindness, there are also families with hatred. So you still have to have some planning. However, Erwin now has 2 cards in his hand that can be used. The Malfoy family is really a good card. Erwin felt that he should be nicer to Draco. At least I can't beat him anymore. After all, this is one of our own. Erwin spent the afternoon class bored. Advertisement, he now has no idea about extra points, because there is no need for him to take action at all. A group of little snakes began to transform into academic masters. Extremely fast. There's Erwin's credit, and there's Hermione's credit as well. In the Slytherin common room, there is a board standing on which is the score of all the little snakes. Hermione came out on top, just a few points behind Charlotte, who was in first place. This made all the little snakes feel a sense of crisis. I was afraid that the Slytherin Medal of Honor would be on Hermione by then. These little snakes are so embarrassed. Also making rapid progress is our Mr. Harry Potter. As a savior, this moment seemed to show his talent. Entry into the country is 1,000 miles away. Without Ron around, Harry Potter made new friends. They are the kind of real friends who can learn from each other, instead of just knowing how to get into trouble. Therefore, Harry Potter's ranking is also around 20. Don't underestimate these 20. This is the ranking common to all Slytherin students. I have to say, in the area of education, Dacia is far ahead. The saying that learning requires an atmosphere is so true. The little snakes had 2 lessons with the little badger. It's like an exhibition match at the snake yard. Earn extra points like crazy. The little badgers were unable to stop it, which made the little badgers feel very frustrated. After class, I looked at Erwin packing his things slowly. All the little badgers were a little envious. If possible, they would also like to have someone like Erwin to coach them. They also want to add points to their college in the classroom. After Erwin packed his things, when he raised his head and met the eyes of the little badgers, Erwin was startled. These little badgers seem to be trying to eat him. It's so scary. Everyone, what's wrong with you? All the little badgers looked at each other. A bold little badger walked out of the crowd and said, "That, Prefect Erwin." The little badger hasn't finished speaking yet. Pansy jumped out. "Shut up, you can't call me prefect. Erwin is our prefect." The little badger was stunned for a moment. He scratched his head and looked silly. Erwin said, "Pansy, be polite. It's just a title. It's not exclusive to Slytherin. Pay attention to your manners." Pansy pouted. "Oh, I know." Erwin looked at the little badger. "Go on. Don't worry about him. You can call him whatever you want." The little badger looked at Erwin. His eyes were a little moist. So gentle, so gentle. Is this Erwin? Are these Slytherins spending time with such gentle people every day? How enviable. Chapter 143. A bunch of little badgers really started to dislike themselves a little at this time. Why don't I have ambition? If I had ambition, would I be able to enter Slytherin and get along with Erwin day and night? Do you have to be unhappy every day with a superior like this? They really want to ask if the branching can be done again. This time, they will also have ambitions, and their ambition is to have a prefect like Erwin. The little badger who came out said, "Well, Prefect Erwin, we heard that Hermione and Harry Potter are taking self-study classes with Slytherin, right?" Erwin nodded. "That's right. What's wrong?" The little badger said, "I also want to go to a self-study class with Slytherin. Is that okay?" After the little badger asked, his face was full of worry. He seemed afraid that Erwin would say no. Erwin smiled and said, "Of course, Slytherin welcomes every student, regardless of school. As long as you are willing to come with us, you can come at any time." The little badger was immediately overjoyed. The other little badgers heard this. He also quickly said, "Prefect Erwin, can we do the same?" Erwin thought for a moment after hearing this. "If you all want to come, then I think you have to bring your own desk. Although there are places in Slytherin's study room, there are not so many tables and chairs. If you bring your own tables and chairs, you are welcome to Slytherin's study room." All the little badgers beamed with joy. "Of course, Prefect Erwin. Can we go there when we have evening self-study?" Erwin smiled and said, "Of course, but before that, I think you should tell Dean Sprout that if Dean Sprout agrees, the door to Slytherin's study room will be open for you at any time." A group of little badgers heard this. After saying hello to Erwin, he hurriedly went to find his dean. Erwin raised the corners of his mouth. The 4 major houses of Hogwarts are actually very interesting. Slytherin recruits ambitious half-blood, pure-blood wizards. The tradition of the college is ambition, shrewdness, emphasis on honor, knowing how to assess the situation, being prudent in protecting oneself, and putting interests first in everything. As for Ravenclaw, all top academics and smart students will be recruited. Gryffindor, on the other hand, takes a fancy to students' hidden courage. In comparison, Hufflepuff's mission is to be perseverant and honest, and not afraid of hard work. It seems very ordinary. In fact, this is indeed the case. However, this does not mean that Hufflepuff is not a strong school. The number of little badgers is really too large. After all, there are always a small number of special people. No matter whether you are ambitious, brave, or smart, such people are always in the minority, and the remaining students will be sorted into Hufflepuff. This also leads to the fact that if we really talk about it, the number of famous figures in the magical world in Hufflepuff is much higher than that of the other 3 academies. After all, the population base is here. Therefore, the importance of the little badgers in Erwin's heart is only lower than that of Slytherin. If Slytherin is the backbone of Erwin's strength in the future, then these little badgers are the real composition. Unlike Voldemort and Grindelwald, who took the elite soldier route, Erwin had always been thinking about explosive warfare. Maybe it's because Erwin lived in Dacia in his previous life. In Erwin's eyes, no matter how powerful an elite soldier is, he cannot compete with a huge population base. To give a simple example, Voldemort is very powerful, but if there is an army of wizards, tens of thousands, or even 100,000 people gathered together, then Voldemort can only turn around and run away. Of course, it is not certain whether there are so many people in the wizarding world. Just giving an example. So Erwin was never stupid enough to turn others away. That's a stupid idea. Erwin will use all the power he can. Only in this way can we reach the final victory. Advertisement. He was really surprised that the little badgers found Erwin. However, this saved Erwin the trouble. It has to be said that the progress of the little snakes in Slytherin has indeed inspired other little wizards. It was really an unexpected surprise. The little snakes didn't say much. Under Erwin's guidance, they now understood a truth. The blood family has never been their pride. Only your own strength is. The only thing that makes the little snakes dissatisfied is that if these little badgers join in, will it make their subsequent competition for the Slytherin Medal of Honor more difficult? Erwin didn't know what they were thinking, otherwise he would have told them. Their worries are very reasonable. Slytherin's Medal of Honor has always been a piece of pie, and now, Erwin seems to have seen a way to make this pie even bigger. On the way to the auditorium, Erwin seemed to feel something. Looking at the sky outside the castle through the windows in the corridor, a red light flashed in the sky. Erwin had a smile on his face. Dumbledore is back. Erwin spent the entire afternoon thinking about what he should order. I already have some ideas in mind, but whether he can succeed or not depends on what Dumbledore will tell him. If Erwin guessed correctly, under the current circumstances, Dumbledore should invite him to join the game. Ron has been completely ruined by Erwin. Even if Dumbledore calls Ron back to Hogwarts, nor can he play the role of a savior companion. Therefore, Dumbledore should also have a headache at this time. I just don't know what conditions Dumbledore will offer. Erwin was still looking forward to it. During the meal in the auditorium, Dumbledore had already appeared on the professor's chair. He sat back in his seat, still dressed in the same outfit, with some funny robes and a magic hat on his head. However, at this time, Dumbledore's face looked somewhat ugly. From time to time, he cast his eyes on Erwin on the Slytherin table. Erwin naturally noticed it too. Just pretend it's completely invisible. Old Dangtu still wanted to scare people, but Erwin didn't accept this trick. Although Erwin knew that Loud Dangtu went out to solve his troubles, Erwin was also very grateful to him, but Erwin would not miss the opportunity to negotiate with Dumbledore. As Snape said, Dumbledore is not trustworthy. This is the truth that Snape got in practice, and it is also the truth that Erwin saw in the original work. So, be grateful to Dumbledore, Erwin. But in Erwin's view, Dumbledore had his own purpose in everything he did. Maybe Erwin himself is a person with no conscience, but facing Dumbledore, Erwin felt that there was no harm in thinking more. Chapter 144. After eating, Erwin comes to Dumbledore's office. Pork and pot. The office door slowly opened. Erwin walked in. Dumbledore sat at the desk. Seeing Erwin coming, he put down the quill in his hand. "You're here." Erwin nodded. "Professor, if you are willing, I am somewhat interested in teaching you the magic spell that transmits the sound directly to my ears. Can you teach me?" Dumbledore smiled and said, "Of course. Please sit down." Erwin sat opposite Dumbledore. Dumbledore folded his hands on the table. A flash of blue light flashed in his eyes. A fleeting moment. Then a look of surprise appeared on Dumbledore's face. "Exquisite occlumency." Erwin smiled and said, "Thank you for the compliment, Professor. But the professor used legilimency on a student. If this spreads, it will definitely cause an uproar in the magical world. Dumbledore, the most powerful white wizard in this century, to actually use legilimency on a new student at Hogwarts, this shouldn't be the first time the professor has used it on me." A cold light flashed in Erwin's eyes. Knowing Dumbledore is coming back, how could Erwin not make some preparations? He went to Snape to learn occlumency specifically. As an expert in occlumency, Snape's simple explanation raised Erwin's occlumency to level 4. Dumbledore said, "Sorry, I just want to know some truth." Erwin spread his hands. "It's a pity to disappoint the professor. Now if the professor wants to use legilimency on me, he can only pick up your wand and point it at my forehead. So, Professor, do you want to do this?" The hand holding the wand under Erwin's robe was slightly stronger. In the other hand, although the muzzle of the gun was covered by the robe, it was already pointed at Dumbledore's abdomen from under the table. Dumbledore shook his head. "It doesn't have to be like this between us. I just helped you solve a big trouble, didn't I?" Erwin nodded. "That's right. I'm very grateful to you, Professor. You let me see a magical feast. Your power not only protected me, but also defended the dignity of Hogwarts. Warning, despite everything, Hogwarts is still the safest place under your protection." Dumbledore leaned back in his chair. "Okay, let's talk, Erwin." Erwin said, "Of course, I don't know what the professor wants to talk about." Dumbledore said, "I will bring Ron back." Advertisement. Erwin nodded. "As you wish, Professor. I never thought about what would happen to Ron. He is a student of Hogwarts." Dumbledore looked at Erwin. He didn't expect Erwin to let go so easily. Erwin seemed to see the confusion in Dumbledore's eyes. He smiled and said, "Professor doesn't think that I intend to let Ron be expelled right now? As I said, there is not that much hatred between us. Moreover, Ron has never been in my eyes. He doesn't care what he thinks. What he wants to do, or what you want him to do, has nothing to do with me." Dumbledore said, "What do you want, Erwin? Or what do you want to do?" Erwin said, "Professor, what do you think Ron can bring to me? It's not that I look down on him. It's that Ron really has nothing worth coveting for me." Dumbledore thought for a moment. "Your goal is the Weasley family?" Erwin shook his head. "Professor, everyone knows that the Weasley family is your loyal subordinate. I don't think Ron can do anything to the Weasley family. I just need to accumulate some strength to protect it's just my life." Dumbledore said, "Your behavior now reminds me of a person." Erwin smiled. "Who? The Dark Lord?" Dumbledore shook his head. "Grindelwald. Compared to Voldemort, he is more terrifying. He knows how to use all power to achieve his own goals. He is ambitious and capable. He is good at manipulating people's hearts." Erwin said, "Saint, I have admired Grindelwald for a long time. The professor thinks highly of me. I am not as good as Grindelwald. Everything I do is just to make myself safer. After all, Professor, you know a lot of things that even I, the client, don't know, and you know the crisis I'm facing. I have to prepare early. I don't want to die inexplicably like my parents one day." Dumbledore nodded. "I understand. Ron will return to Hogwarts next week. I hope you won't target him." Erwin said, "I have never targeted him. Like I said, Ron has never been in my eyes." Dumbledore shook his head and said, "Not enough. I hope you can restrain Slytherin." Erwin smiled and said, "Professor, what makes you think that I can control the preferences of everyone in Slytherin? They are complete individuals and complete people." Dumbledore said, "Say your terms, Erwin. You and I both know that you can do this." Erwin shook his head. "No, I can't be a professor." Dumbledore also felt a little headache looking at Erwin, who was so out of touch. The premise of negotiation is that people have to talk to you, and Erwin has no intention of talking about it right now. Dumbledore had no idea what to do. Dumbledore said, "Erwin, before I came back, I went to the burrow and met Ron." Erwin nodded. "Yeah, I guessed it, and what next?" "The professor wanted to tell me that you also used legilimency on Ron and saw what I said to Ron. Then he wanted to tell me, do you know enough to ruin my reputation? But Professor, will you expose him? Which one is more eye-catching, a scheming little wizard, an evil little wizard, or a principal who uses legilimency on students?" Woolen cloth? The corners of Erwin's mouth rose. In fact, he had already simulated the possible situation of talking to Dumbledore in his mind. Dumbledore's use of legilimency on Ron was also part of Erwin's prediction. If you want to know what's going on with Erwin and Ron, there are two simple ways: legilimency and pensive. As for the pensive, Erwin was certain that Ron would not be able to learn it, and he might not even be able to learn it when he graduates. As for legilimency, the Weasleys would not use it on their children, and no one except Dumbledore could control legilimency to the extent that it would not hurt anyone. If Dumbledore wanted to expose Erwin, he would also expose the fact that he used legilimency on his students. Therefore, during this conversation between Erwin and Dumbledore, he did not even think about continuing to pretend. Chapter 145. Dumbledore looked at Erwin. I felt inexplicably frustrated. Once again, he had nothing to do with Erwin. Erwin said, "Professor, it's difficult for me to control everyone and not target Ron, but I can tell the Slytherin students. Tell them not to go out of their way to trouble Ron. All I can do is come this far." Dumbledore groaned. "Conditions?" Erwin said, "When I need a summer vacation, the professor will go to a place with me." Dumbledore thought for a moment. "You want to go to Germany?" Erwin smiled. "That's right." Dumbledore said, "Okay, I agree." Erwin raised the corners of his mouth. This wave is considered a prophet. Even if Dumbledore hadn't come to him, he wouldn't have let the little snakes target Ron. After all, Erwin still has to create his own generous persona. If the little snakes are looking for trouble, who knows if some people will think that they are the ones who ordered it. Totally unnecessary. Moreover, Erwin never took Ron seriously. Ron was never Erwin's purpose. Making a deal with Dumbledore, Erwin made the profit. Who would object to a free trade? Erwin said, "If there's nothing else, I'll leave first, Professor." "Wait a minute, Erwin. I have another thing I want to talk to you about." Erwin looked at Dumbledore. "Dean, do you want to do any more business with me?" Dumbledore said, "I just wanted to know how Harry is doing." Erwin said, "Didn't Professor McGonagall tell the Dean? Harry's performance should be good these days." Dumbledore nodded. "Harry, he is different. He has his own special mission." Erwin nodded without any intention of answering. Dumbledore waited a moment. Erwin didn't speak. The office became eerily quiet for a moment. Dumbledore was a little helpless. Dealing with Erwin is really a bit tiring. Dumbledore said, "Aren't you curious about what's different about him?" Erwin shook his head. "I'm not curious. He is different and has nothing to do with me. You know, I'm just an ordinary little wizard." Dumbledore resisted the urge to pick up his wand. He said, "Harry shoulders a very important mission. You should have heard that he ended Voldemort and saved the wizarding world." This is what Erwin said, "Professor, although I know it is rude to interrupt you, but the evening self-study has begun. If you want to tell me a story, you might as well wait until next time. I still need to watch the evening self-study. You may not know that my godfather, Professor Snape, needs to brew a potion these days, so he doesn't care about studying in the evening. If I don't go there, if something goes wrong, my godfather may not let me go." Dumbledore was stunned for a moment. "Have you accepted Severus as your godfather?" Advertisement. Erwin nodded. A flash of light flashed in Dumbledore's eyes. "Congratulations, Severus will be a very qualified godfather." Erwin said, "I think so too." "Professor, can I leave?" Dumbledore said, "Erwin, Hogwarts is in danger at this time." Erwin sneered inwardly. "Old thing, finally got to the point." Erwin said with a look of horror on his face, "That's really scary, but I have confidence in the professors. They will definitely protect the safety of Hogwarts, let alone Professor you. Hogwarts is the safest place in the entire wizarding world. I always firmly believe it." Dumbledore said, "Erwin, this crisis needs your help. In other words, only Harry can handle this crisis. And you need to help Harry." Erwin wondered, "I don't understand, Professor. If there is a crisis that you can't solve, it can only be solved by Harry. With all due respect, although Harry is very good, he is much worse than the professor. Even if I can't compare to the professors, I really can't think of any crisis that the professors can't solve, but Harry can. Dumbledore said, there are many things that cannot be solved by pure strength, right? Erwin smiled and said, of course. However, crises are usually caused by lack of strength, right? Dumbledore felt his head hurt even more. Erwin said, I remember the last time I came to the principal's office. The principal said something. Harry needs to grow up. If I guess correctly, this so-called crisis is specially used to help Harry grow up. Artificial words crisis? Dumbledore said, Erwin, you are really smart, yes? It is true. Do you know Nicholas Flamel? Well, the greatest alchemist of this century has refined the magic stone, which can turn stone into gold and even make you immortal. Dumbledore nodded. Yes, the Philosopher's Stone is in Hogwarts now. Erwin said, wow, that's amazing. It really deserves to be Hogwarts. There is such a legendary thing. Dumbledore was paralyzed. Was he right in this reaction? It's obviously wrong. Dumbledore was no longer too lazy to continue to guide Erwin to follow his train of thought. Just say directly, the Dark Lord is not dead, and now he is hiding in Hogwarts, trying to get the Philosopher's Stone. Erwin said, wow, that's really unfortunate. I hope the professor can find him as soon as possible. It's really terrible. Dumbledore said, Voldemort's current situation is a bit special. I can't find him. Only Harry can find him and destroy him. Similarly, Voldemort also wants to kill Harry. Harry is very dangerous, so Elvin, you need to help Harry. Erwin mentally rolled his eyes. Did Lao Deng really lie out of his mouth? Still can't find Voldemort? This Voldemort probably knew exactly what time Dumbledore picked his nose every day. Is there not a single word of truth in this old guy's mouth? Erwin said, oh my God, that's really terrible. No, Professor, I have to find Harry and let him go back to school for a while. I don't want to see Harry in danger. After all, that's my friend. Erwin said and turned around to leave. Dumbledore's face darkened. He had no doubt about Erwin's position in Harry's heart. Harry might actually be capable of such a thing. Then why did he spend so much time planning it? Dumbledore said, wait a minute, Erwin. Harry can defeat Voldemort, as long as you help him. He can completely eliminate the danger once and for all. Erwin sneered inwardly. Once and for all? It is obviously a level-breaking game. After one level, there will be another level. According to Snape, Dumbledore was training Harry to be a pig to be slaughtered. Chapter 146. Erwin looked at Dumbledore and said, with all due respect, Professor, do you think there is a possibility that the Dark Lord's life or death does not seem to have any impact on me, right? I have always adhered to the saying, the strong hung chiang. Voldemort's life and death will not affect me at all. At worst, when the Dark Lord comes to power, if he can save my life, I don't think I can't join him. You know, Professor Dumbledore, you have already seen it my essence. I want to live, always. Dumbledore was speechless for a moment, because what Erwin said was true, and he seemed to really have no need to care about Voldemort's life and death. Dumbledore felt a little uncomfortable for a moment. When talking to Erwin, he always felt that everything exceeded his expectations. This made Dumbledore, who was used to being in control of everything, uncomfortable. Dumbledore looked at Erwin. Erwin, you said that Harry is your friend. As a friend, shouldn't you help him? Erwin smiled. Professor, you shouldn't be so naive. From the moment you told me that you had been to the Burrow, you should have known that our relationship has changed. I will not continue to pretend to be a good child with you. Tell me, this is all your choice, isn't it? If you want me to help, then tell me your price. Friendship cannot hold me back. You know this very well. Dumbledore sighed. He understood that he had made a wrong move. From the moment he revealed Erwin's true nature, the pretense of peace between him and Erwin had been torn to pieces. Erwin will no longer be arranged by Dumbledore just to build his character. It can be said that Erwin has no scruples in front of Dumbledore. This was all Dumbledore's own doing. Some words should not be said in person. Now that Dumbledore has spoken out, he will have to bear the consequences. Dumbledore sat there silently. Erwin wasn't in a hurry either. He picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip. Then he frowned. Black tea with sugar added really doesn't taste good. Dumbledore spread his hands. Sweetness is the best taste in the world. It can make you feel happy. Erwin said, maybe. So, Professor, what's your price? Dumbledore said, I have already thought of what I can give you. Erwin shook his head. No, Professor. You have something in your hand that I'm quite interested in. Advertisement. Dumbledore was stunned for a moment and thought for a moment. You mean, the Sorcerer's Stone? The corner of Erwin's mouth raised. Yes, the magic stone, but I don't want the current magic stone that has almost no energy. I need a magic stone with full energy. Dumbledore shook his head. It's impossible. Not even Nico Flamel can make another Philosopher's Stone. Erwin smiled and said, Professor, you are really insincere. I discovered something very interesting while I was reading in the library. Are you willing to listen to it? Dumbledore looked at the smile on Erwin's face. He frowned. Erwin ignored Dumbledore and continued. The book says that after the great alchemist Nicholas Flamel turned mercury into gold, he suddenly had the idea of fixing his ability on an object, so that the object would be endowed with the ability to turn stone into gold. However, although Nico Flamel's talent in alchemy is unprecedented, he could not achieve his vision with his strength. So he found his own way friends, create together. With the joint efforts of the two, they found a very special material. This material was finally achieved with Nico Flamel's superb alchemy and the magic power of the strong man. Nico Flamel's idea could turn stone into gold. Nico Flamel was ecstatic and named it the Philosopher's Stone, but soon, Nico Flamel discovered that the wizard's magic power might be too powerful. After all, the magic stone is very unstable. Therefore, Nico Flamel used alchemy to split the magic power of this magic stone into two parts. He hid it from everyone except his wizard friend, and he told the separated piece of magic stone was given to my friend as a reward and to help keep it safe. Later, Nico Flamel's health became worse and worse, but he still had many things he wanted to study, so he transformed it again on the basis of the Philosopher's Stone, and used his superb alchemist level to give it another function of the magic stone is to extend human life. However, immortality is illusory after all, and no one can really control this power. So this kind of immortality has become a false immortality. It is better to say that it is immortality, but it is better to say that it changes people's taste. The product of alchemy. And another magic stone without the ability to live forever was taken away by the wizard and disappeared. And you, Professor Dumbledore, are the owner of the other magic stone. Am I right? A glint flashed in Dumbledore's eyes. Erwin, where did you know this? Erwin's heart skipped a beat. Really? Erwin is also talking nonsense. This thing is that when Erwin was browsing the forum in his previous life, he saw a post about unofficial history, but the blogger used a lot of evidence to prove the credibility of his post-analysis. Erwin was just watching the fun at the time. When I say it now, I intend to deceive Dumbledore. In fact, Erwin's goal is the magic stone that has no energy. As for the reason for wanting that thing, it was simply research. But listening to Dumbledore's tone, this thing actually exists? So the blogger actually analyzed it correctly? Erwin's face remained calm. I told you, I read a book. It's recorded in the book, Dumbledore said. Since you don't want to tell the truth, I won't ask you any more questions. That's right. There is indeed another Philosopher's Stone. Many of what you said are right, except for me and Nico Lu apart from May. No one should know. Although I don't know where you got the news, the magic stone in my hand has no other function. It can only turn stone into gold, but I think you are not short of money. I don't understand why you want that thing. Erwin said, Of course I have my own reasons, Professor. No need to ask. What I want is the Philosopher's Stone. As long as the professor agrees, then this semester, as long as I am at Hogwarts, I will not let Harry be harmed. Dumbledore shook his head. Not enough. I want you to become Harry's protector. Erwin sneered. Professor, it's getting late. I have to go back to study in the evening. Good night. Chapter 147. After Erwin finished speaking, he stood up and walked directly outside. Dumbledore was stunned. I didn't expect Erwin to be so decisive. This time Dumbledore was confused. If you bargain, you should get the same price. What's the point of standing up and flipping the table? Dumbledore was confused. He believed that he had dealt with too many people, and there were many who were stronger than Erwin. But he could swear that there really was no such person as Erwin. Erwin never followed rules. When Dumbledore talked to anyone, he was always the one who controlled the rhythm. But when it comes to Erwin, this is not the case at all. It is Erwin who controls everything. Erwin always has a firm grasp on the rhythm. Every word in rhythm is controlled by Erwin. If something were to escape Erwin's control, Erwin would just flip the table. This kind of person is the most difficult to deal with. Even Dumbledore's old lover would not do this. And this is exactly where Erwin is smart. Erwin didn't think he had a higher IQ than Dumbledore. Therefore, before Erwin talks to Dumbledore, he will think about what he wants. He is not talking about what he can give. He is just putting forward his own demands and his own weight. As long as he exceeds the limit he has set for himself, he will directly overturn the table. Is the Philosopher's Stone important? In fact, for Erwin, it's really not that important. Erwin wanted him for two reasons. The first one was for research. What if he stepped on shit and could research the real method of immortality from the magic stone? Isn't that a huge profit? Another reason is the Midas touch. Erwin is going to make a magic battery. Gold is very expensive. Although the Cavendi family is quite wealthy, the money will be spent. There is no doubt that the Philosopher's Stone can help Erwin save a lot of money. It looked like Erwin was almost walking to the door. Dumbledore said quickly, "Wait a minute, Erwin, I agree." Dumbledore couldn't help it if he didn't want to agree. All this was done against Voldemort and Harry Potter. Let Harry Potter grow up and let Voldemort deliver the Horcruxes to his door one by one, just like Calabash Boy saved his grandfather. Let Harry grow up and destroy the Horcruxes at the same time. Dumbledore cannot participate in this process, because if Dumbledore gets involved even a little bit, Voldemort will change his plan. Because Voldemort is really afraid of Dumbledore. Therefore, Erwin can be confident, because Dumbledore needs Harry Potter to grow, and even more needs Harry Potter to live. Now Ron and Hermione are no longer with Harry Potter because of Erwin's intervention. Without a reckless man, a wise man, or the bonds of friendship, even Dumbledore didn't think Harry Potter could persevere. Advertisement, so he could only ask Erwin for help. For this reason, Dumbledore had no choice but to agree to Erwin's conditions. Erwin turned around and raised the corners of his mouth. "Well, Professor, I wish us a happy cooperation," Dumbledore said. "It's a pleasure to cooperate, but the Philosopher's Stone needs to wait until I leave Hogwarts later to help you get it back. It's not in my hands now." Erwin nodded. There was no surprise, and there was no surprise that Dumbledore would leave. Because Dumbledore had to leave, and if he didn't leave, Voldemort wouldn't dare to do anything. His poor and timid teacher is really heartbreaking. Erwin said, "I'm not too anxious, by the way. Professor, during the holidays, I will open a new shop in Diagon Alley. I will sell some new gadgets. I hope the professor can come to visit, and I will help you prepare a gift." Dumbledore said, "Is this one of the conditions?" Erwin's face was full of surprise. "Oh my God, Professor! I can't believe that you would think like this." "Of course not. This is my invitation. Your students are doing business. As a principal, don't you intend to accept your students' invitation?" "Invitation?" Dumbledore nodded. "I will go." Erwin bowed slightly. "Well, Professor, goodbye." Erwin glanced at the small door of the bedroom behind Dumbledore calmly and raised the corners of his mouth, then turned and left. "Wait until Erwin leaves." The bedroom door opened and Snape walked out. Dumbledore said, "Severus, can you send the letter now?" Snape said, "I told you, the letter will appear in Lucius's hand on time tomorrow morning." Dumbledore frowned. "Erwin has already let go." Snape shook his head. "But the Weasley family still needs to be polished through hardships, doesn't it?" Dumbledore sighed and did not continue on this topic. "Erwin is very good and very smart. Since you, Severus, are already his godfather, you have the obligation to guide him on the right path." Snape sneered. "What is the right path? Is there anything wrong with his current path? Is what you said the correct one?" "Dumbledore, you think too highly of yourself. Erwin is very good. His path is also right. Even if his path is wrong, I will use the magic wand in my hand to make this path the right one. Even if this road is full of thorns and dangers, I believe that my magic wand can help him sweep it away." These dangers. Dumbledore was helpless. This makes no sense at all. Snape couldn't understand human speech at all. Not a word can be conveyed. "How can we talk about this?" "Not much to talk about," Dumbledore said. "Now that Erwin is gone, you can rest assured." Snape looked at Dumbledore. "Albus Dumbledore, don't force me to become your enemy. Even if I am not your opponent, I can tear off your flesh. If you dare to use Erwin again, legilimency words." After saying that, Snape turned and left the office. Dumbledore sat in his chair. A pair of eyes were a little cloudy, and I didn't know what I was thinking. Behind him, laughter came from the portrait. "What a mess, Dumbledore. I've told you before that you're hypocritical. You're using legilimency to check students' memories. I'm sorry you figured it out. There is no one else but our dear Principal Black who can speak so annoyingly under such circumstances." Dumbledore said, "It's really a mess. I haven't congratulated you yet, but there are still many people in your family who are willing to give face. I didn't expect that the Black family actually has such a background." Phineas said coldly, "The Black family will always be pure, even the children who are married out. The pure blood heritage is here." Dumbledore smiled and said, "Are you still lying to yourself now? Pure blood. There is no real pure blood. It is just a lie from the 28 tribes. Phineas stopped talking, and the office fell into silence. Again. Chapter 148. On the other side, after Erwin left Dumbledore's office, I looked at the time and saw that there was no point in going to evening self-study now. Erwin didn't bother to go there either. Just go to Snape's office to plan your overtime work today. After arriving at the office, Erwin sat in the seat where he stayed every day and began to process the potions. After a while, Snape returned to his office. Seeing Erwin, he didn't ask any more questions, and Erwin didn't ask Snape anything. Erwin knew that Snape was in Dumbledore's office. In fact, the reason is very simple. Snape does not trust Dumbledore. So when Erwin goes to Dumbledore's office, Snape will definitely protect him. The only thing that surprised Erwin was that Snape didn't come out directly to give Dumbledore a magic edge when Dumbledore used legilimency. It was obvious that Erwin had already felt Snape's surging magic power at that time. Now it seems that it was because Snape knew Erwin's level of acclimacy. After working for a long time, Erwin dragged his exhausted body out of Snape's office, yawned. Erwin felt like his body was a little exhausted, but he couldn't rest just yet, because there's one thing he hasn't done yet. He also had to go to Professor Quirrell because his teacher was looking for him. Erwin felt like a cow or horse, the kind of cows and horses that never stop. Really tired. It's like there is an unlucky guy in front of the screen. He has already gone out to play on October 1st, but he still has to take out the time to take out the computer to code and still can't receive the King of Gifts. He looks like a clown. In Professor Quirrell's office, Professor Quirrell was as enthusiastic as ever when he saw Erwin coming. Erwin also greeted politely. Just when Erwin was about to start the daily greetings, Voldemort's voice came. That's enough. Quirrell, there is no time for you to waste today. Now, give the clothes to Erwin and let him change. Let's go to the Forbidden Forest. Erwin's heart moved, and it turned out to be true. Voldemort couldn't hold on anymore, so he needed to use the blood of the unicorn to enhance his energy to extend his life. Unicorns are the most holy creatures, and their lives are cursed. Anyone who hurts a unicorn will become unfortunate. This is a causal weapon. Anyway, it's quite mysterious as to why Voldemort is not afraid. It's Quirrell who drinks the unicorn's blood. What does it have to do with Tom? I have to say that this wave really made the Voldemort card bug successful. I just feel sorry for our Professor Quirrell. Erwin glanced at Quirrell, and sure enough, Professor Quirrell had a bitter look on his face. Professor Quirrell took a black robe from the side, passed it to Erwin. Erwin, this allows you to hide your identity. Erwin nodded. Then he took the black robe. When he came to the side and put on the black robe, he put it into the space ring. Then the versatile suit on his body turned directly into the black robe. Who knows who wore this black robe, and whether there are any bacteria? Erwin wouldn't wear it. After changing into black robe, Voldemort said, Erwin, my disciple, with my current strength, I cannot plant the dark mark on you. Therefore, you cannot use the flying method that is unique to Death Eaters, but you should be able to fly a broom. Then I've prepared a flying broom for you in the corner. I'm waiting for you in the Forbidden Forest. Come over as soon as possible. Advertisement. Erwin nodded and bowed slightly. Of course. Teacher, I will rush over as soon as possible. Voldemort nodded, and the next moment, he directly controlled Quirrell's body. In a flash, his body turned into a black mist and flew out of the window, heading straight for the Forbidden Forest. Erwin groped his chin. Not to mention, Voldemort's black mist was quite hidden in the dark. Erwin is not good at this. A cloud of purple smoke is a bit conspicuous. However, only rats need to hide their heads and show their tails, right? Erwin glanced at the flying broom in the corner. I rolled my eyes. No need for dogs. But how weak is this Voldemort that he doesn't know about Erwin's ability to disapparate? Erwin never hid it from others. Many people knew that Erwin could fly. Erwin took out his wand and sat down at Professor Quirrell's desk. The wand struck 3 times in a specific rhythm. The next moment, McGee appeared at the table. Mr. Erwin, are you looking for me? Erwin nodded. Yeah, if you're hungry, let's make a bowl and eat it. There's still something to do, so hurry up. McGee nodded. Okay, sir. Right away? Please wait for me. Then, McGee snapped his fingers and disappeared. Erwin looked at the place where McGee disappeared. Don't say it. You really don't say it. This ability is really enviable. It has the same effect as a certain outrageous big pillar who claps his hands and gets whatever he wants. Erwin put the wand against the purple love mark on his arm, and then opened and closed his lips a few times. Erwin drew his wand away. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. My dear teacher, I hope you like the gift I have prepared for you. This is the intention of a disciple. Not long after, McGee appeared again with a bowl of chai show. Red. Awesome. McGee placed the bowl in front of Erwin. Mr. Erwin, it's ready to eat. You can try it. I'm a bit short on time. I wanted to put in some other ingredients, but I couldn't find the right ingredients at the moment. I'm sorry. Erwin waved his hand. It's okay. Just sit there for a while and wait for me to finish eating. McGee said, No, this is the great professor's room. I can't sit down. Erwin said, Sit on the floor, it's okay. I let you sit. McGee carefully sat down next to Erwin's feet and polished Erwin's leather shoes. Erwin didn't stop him. The previous wizard was too terrifying, and the elf's servility was too deep in his heart. McGee asked in a low voice, Mr. Erwin, did you study until so late? Erwin said while eating, Yeah. The professor is looking for me. McGee said, Mr. Erwin is really outstanding. McGee has been at Hogwarts for many years and has never seen anyone as hardworking as you. After McGee finished speaking, he quickly covered his mouth. I'm sorry, Mr. Erwin. McGee is a bad elf. McGee actually said what other little wizards said. McGee is such a bad elf. Erwin looked at McGee and was about to go crazy again. He hurriedly finished the last meal and stopped McGee. Okay, take the bowl away. I have something else to do. McGee nodded. Erwin stretched. Now it's time to get down to business. The bowtruckle should be ready. The corners of Erwin's mouth rose. He couldn't wait to watch the fun. Not far from the entrance to the Forbidden Forest, Voldemort is hiding in the woods. The evening breeze after Halloween was a bit chilly, and Voldemort in his current state would not waste his magic power on casting a constant temperature spell. He shivered, and Voldemort was a little angry. Chapter 149. He was getting a little restless waiting. As one person with two souls, Quirrell immediately noticed Voldemort's emotional changes. In fact, Quirrell is still very enviable. There are many Death Eaters who have no hope of getting close contact with Voldemort, not to mention having the same emotional perception as Voldemort's two souls. This is something that many Death Eaters would envy. Professor Quirrell said, Master, please don't be angry. Erwin must be delayed by something. You also know that when Erwin comes from the castle, he needs to avoid a lot of people. In case he is discovered, it will also ruin the Master's plan. Don't you think so? Voldemort himself was not thinking very well in this state. After listening to Quirrell's words, he didn't think too much. I think what Quirrell said makes sense. Quirrell felt Voldemort's mood swings subside. He breathed a subtle sigh of relief. In any case, it's okay to fool him. But now this fool is getting harder and harder to fool. I sighed in my heart. He could only do so much to help Erwin. Ever since he met Voldemort, he seemed to have suddenly come to his senses. He didn't want to eat Voldemort's cakes. If before today, he still had a way to turn back. But as long as he killed the unicorn today, even if he didn't do it himself, he will also be unlucky in the end. In other words, his life is no longer under his control at this moment. All he could do was prevent Voldemort from harming Erwin. Not for anything else, just for the time when he had already pretended to be submissive and was used to being in the eyes of everyone's ridicule. Erwin illuminated his darkness. Therefore, he must do everything he can to keep Erwin from harm. And Erwin at this time, he was negotiating with the broomstick not far from the Forbidden Forest. Since Voldemort didn't know Erwin could fly, of course Erwin would hide the news. It might come in handy at some point. Although Erwin likes to show off, showing off in front of the Dark Lord is obviously not a good idea. Not to mention, Erwin only came here after eating a bowl of chow show. This makes it even more difficult to reveal that you can fly. Otherwise, how should he explain it to Voldemort if he asked him? Erwin's tone was very soft. Just take me to the Forbidden Forest. Fly slowly and land gently. Okay. The broomstick under his butt is as quiet as an ordinary broom. Erwin had a bright smile on his face. I give you 3 seconds to send me flying as gently as possible. Otherwise, I will send you to meet your brothers and sisters in the Slytherin fireplace. You understand what I said? Erwin's tone was gentle. It's like a ray of spring breeze. It also seems to be a lover's hand. However, the flying broomstick who heard this didn't think so. The broomstick trembled visibly. Advertisement, then it slowly floated up. It can swear that many people have ridden it, but only at this moment it is the gentlest. Erwin rides a broomstick for the first time. To be honest, the feeling of stuck egg is not very good. After all, it is somewhat uncomfortable to be stuck between the legs. Fortunately, Erwin didn't have to ride for too long. Erwin did not control the broomstick intentionally. Just pointing in a direction, the broomstick flew over obediently. Compared to other people's broomsticks, Erwin's speed is really too slow, but it's very stable. Erwin even took out Professor McGonagall's notes and read them for a while. Of course, he wouldn't do it because it would be too stupid. Not long after, the broomstick fell slowly. In the woods, Voldemort's figure came out. Erwin, you are too slow. Erwin bowed slightly, his face under the hood showing no expression. Erwin said, sorry, teacher. Filch is patrolling the corridor. As you know, I have to avoid him using his broomstick outside the castle, otherwise it is likely to be seen by others. Professor McGonagall is on duty today. If Professor McGonagall finds out, I will be expelled. Voldemort nodded and said, that damn squib Filch. Dirty B asterisk 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 D. Hogwarts has really become more and more depraved, and now it will actually take in a squib. Ridiculous. Okay, let's go. Erwin nodded and ignored what Voldemort said. After all, Voldemort is a loyal blood believer. He is serious. Bloodline is everything. There is no reason to argue with him. Just say whatever you want. Does it have anything to do with Erwin? Voldemort walked towards the depths of the Forbidden Forest. Erwin followed closely behind. Voldemort said, today I need to hunt a unicorn, and by the way, I want you to actually use the rope spell. Of course, you can just help me from the side. When I was at my peak, a unicorn could do it with a flip of my hand, kill. But you also saw that I am very weak now. So I need you to help me harass me. Erwin nodded. Of course, teacher. As your disciple, I am willing to give everything for you. I feel very guilty. I don't have enough strength. Otherwise, I would like to hunt a unicorn with my own hands. Come and help. Teacher, you. Voldemort was very impressed by Erwin's words. He nodded. I have already felt your loyalty. When I return, believe me, you will have a status you can't imagine. But forget about the unicorn. The person who kills the unicorn will be killed by the unicorn. Curse. Your future should not end here. Erwin was a little surprised. It's broken. Mr. Arsocket didn't really believe it. No, how could this possibly move in a moving direction? What is this operation? Erwin didn't understand, but it didn't matter. Erwin has long been accustomed to talking to people and talking to ghosts. Mr. Socket is half human and half ghost, which just matches Erwin's expertise. The two continued to advance deeper into the Forbidden Forest. Walked for a while. Out of the corner of his eye, Erwin saw a sliver of green hidden behind the trees. Erwin waved his hand gently. Bowtruckle understood instantly. Hide your figure behind a big tree. Voldemort asked. What? Is there a problem? Erwin shook his head. No, teacher. I'm just curious where the unicorn will appear. Voldemort said. Then I will teach you another lesson today. The existing information tells us that unicorns will live in places with water. They are holy, so they do not allow their bodies to be contaminated with dust. But I tell you, this is wrong. I have seen too many magical creatures, including unicorns of course. What they like is not actually water. They like to stay in places where they are illuminated by the moonlight, and their groups usually stay in a place illuminated by the moonlight. Chapter 150. Erwin quickly took Voldemort's words to heart. Did you see that? This is the knowledge reserve of a legendary wizard. This is knowledge that cannot be learned from books. Erwin asked, are we going to find the unicorn tribe now? Voldemort shook his head. No, the combat power of adult unicorns is very terrifying. Although I was not afraid in my heyday, Quirrell, this waste, has too little magic power. He cannot support a battle with adult unicorns. Now I'm going to look for a lonely little unicorn. Young unicorns will leave the group after midnight and look for moongrass in the forest for food. Erwin nodded. Look, it's another piece of knowledge that's not in the books. Sure enough, Voldemort is a treasure. This treasure had to be developed slowly, and Erwin felt a little regretful. Will the gift I prepared for Voldemort be a little too expensive? Can Voldemort bear it? Don't let Voldemort play to death. Then such a good tutor cannot be found. That's really a shame. There is still a long time left in this semester. If Voldemort dies, it will be his fault. But after all, he is also a legendary mage, so he shouldn't die so easily. Thinking of this, Erwin felt relieved. Continue walking forward. Not long after, they arrived at the lake where Erwin met the unicorn last time. Erwin saw a unicorn drinking water by the lake at a glance. This unicorn's horn is slightly rounded. Not that sharp. Voldemort raised his hand, and the two of them hid behind the trees. Voldemort said, an adult female unicorn. What an unexpected gain. Its combat power is weaker than that of male unicorns, but it is stronger than that of young unicorns, but it is within the acceptable range. The power of blood, it also contains more magic power than a baby unicorn. It seems that my luck is really good. Erwin, I will attack it in a while. You need to be there to help. Erwin nodded. As you wish, my teacher. I will definitely fulfill your instructions. Voldemort nodded. Then the body turned into a black mist. He ran out directly from behind the tree. Avada eats the big melon. Voldemort's first move was to kill his face. Erwin clicked his tongue in surprise. Good guy. He is indeed an expert in the death curse. The ease with which he can release the death curse is no less than that of Harry Potter's Expelliarmus. The female unicorn who was drinking water immediately sensed the danger. He ran quickly and hid behind a tree. The killing curse hit the tree trunk directly. Leaves marks on tree trunks. However, there was no penetration. Voldemort cursed. Damn it! The release speed of this body is too slow. Erwin rolled his eyes and looked at our Dark Lord, who was so disgusted with using someone else's body. At this moment, Voldemort shouted, "Take action!" Erwin jumped out from behind the tree. Split into pieces. A spell crashed directly into the tree next to the female unicorn. With a click, the tree trunk was directly shattered by Erwin's spell. Voldemort turned to look at Erwin. Erwin quickly said, "Sorry, teacher, it was my first time to see a unicorn. I was a little nervous and the magic spell was wrong." Voldemort didn't say anything. Who asked Erwin to find such a reasonable reason? The female unicorn spread her hooves and ran towards the distance. Advertisement Voldemort's body turned into a ball of black smoke and chased after him. As for Erwin, he sat on the ground. He also wanted to catch up, but he couldn't. He is a poor egg that cannot fly. His dear teacher probably wouldn't blame him. Erwin just sat down. Bowtruckle swung his two slender little green legs and ran to Erwin's side. Rubbed against Erwin's body. Erwin lowered his palm. The Bowtruckle jumped into Erwin's hand. Erwin asked, "Have you told the unicorn leader?" Bowtruckle nodded. Then he screamed twice. Erwin nodded. "Then why is there still a female unicorn here?" Bowtruckle barked twice to explain. Erwin said, "It's too risky. This is the Dark Lord, and using a unicorn as bait may not necessarily solve him. If a female unicorn is damaged, it will be a big loss." The Bowtruckle wrapped two branches around Erwin's arms. Hanging on the swing by itself, it makes two sounds from time to time. Erwin smiled and said, "Maybe. However, I don't think they can keep the Dark Lord. It doesn't matter. Leave them alone. Anyway, my message has been delivered." But what he said makes sense. There is always a crisis lurking in the dark. That's not the case. If I were it, I would also want to solve it once and for all. Not to mention, the boss of this unicorn has quite some ideas. Bowtruckle tightened the branches lightly. Erwin smiled and said, Okay, I know you are also good, but are you sure you found something that the unicorn kept? What is it?" The Bowtruckle barked twice. "A statue? A statue of a woman?" Bowtruckle nodded. Erwin thought for a moment. Was that Ravenclaw? The Bowtruckle let go of its branches and fell to the ground. Pulled Erwin's arm. Erwin shook his head. "Not today. I have other things to do. Besides, it doesn't mean much for me to go there now. Let's wait until later. I will come to you when I have time, and we will go for a walk, and even if it's really what is the secret, the unicorn designation knows more than we do. Without the support of the unicorn, we have no way of knowing the real secret. You should leave first. If nothing else, it's time for me to chase it." Bowtruckle nodded. Then he waved the branch at Erwin, turned around and disappeared into the jungle. Erwin chased after Voldemort in the direction he left. They didn't go far when they heard bursts of roars, accompanied by thunder falling from the sky. Erwin was shocked. What the hell is this? He missed something again. Erwin hurriedly ran forward. Not long after, Erwin saw the two warring parties. It was the majestic male unicorn and Voldemort. I saw the electric light lingering on the horn of the male unicorn. Every time he waved his horn, a bolt of thunder would hit Voldemort. And Voldemort was a little miserable at this time. There were some holes in the clothes, and he had obviously been beaten. Erwin was speechless. Is this what unicorns are capable of? This thing can actually control the thunder? So silly. Voldemort saw Erwin coming and shouted, "Use the death curse." After seeing Erwin, the male unicorn's eyes flashed with confusion. But it didn't expose Erwin's identity. Even if it exposed Voldemort, he still wouldn't understand. Erwin took out his wand. What's going on? Teacher, I was so nervous that I forgot the spell.
Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card, directly on my channel, or right here on the screen. And as always, if you have any feedback, feel free to share it in the comments too.